You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Get in the game with the college-branded Venmo debit card. Wreck your team with every tap and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash, a new rewards program from Venmo. No monthly fee, no minimum balance, just school pride and spending power. Get in the game and sign up for the Venmo debit card at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Protein is now at Starbucks, and it's never tasted so good. You can add protein cold foam to your favorite drink or try one of our new protein lattes or matcha. Try it today at Starbucks.
This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
And if you're not a member, consider joining. Members get extra episodes just for Patreon subscribers, and all our episodes ad-free.
Membership starts at just $2 a month. Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl for more info. And as always, thanks for listening.
Hey, fellow listeners of Ancient History Fangirl.
We are Dr. G
and Dr. Rad.
We host a podcast on ancient Rome called The Partial Historians.
If you're interested in getting behind the story of Rome and you kiss a picture of Agrippina the Younger before bed every night, join our conversation.
You can find us by searching for The Partial Historians or at partialhistorians.com.
We are also active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And now back to the Ancient History Fangirls.
Enjoy the show!
If you've got a problem, take it up with my sack of gold. You never dreamt it would end this way. You sit in the prow of the great Antonia, the ship rising and falling with the rolling sea. Nothing around you but the sound of the wind and the slap of the oars against water. This was not how it was supposed to go. Cleopatra never should have run that blockade. Not so soon. Not with half your navy in tow, at the height of the pivotal battle, but her sins are not so great as yours. Because the minute you saw her go, you jumped in your fastest ship and gone after her, abandoning your men to their fate. It goes against all honorable behavior for any self-respecting Roman general. What you're supposed to do if a battle is lost is to move and regroup, start over on favorable ground. Amidst all the myriad rules of war, there is only one that matters. Never abandon your men. And now, here you are, the great hero of Philippi, disgraced and beaten by a boy half your age. None will follow you now. Despite the broad horizon, you can feel the world closing in around you, your fate tightening its fist. You could say you went after her because you knew the battle was lost, but that isn't the truth of it. The truth is, you'd seen that ship glide past, and in that instant, you thought you'd lost her. There was nothing else you could do. This battle was your last stand. You know in your bones you won't get another. But you'd do it again just this way. You'd let the world burn to keep her safe.
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
That's it? You're just going to be Jen McMenemy today?
Oh, I see how it is. You only like me when I'm the severed head of Crassus. Or a war elephant.
I gotta say, the severed head of Crassus did an ace job, Jen. You have a lot to live up to.
I do. And man, if I could get that eyeliner game down.
I'm talking about the eyeliner and the performance on the podcast. You should just go back, listen to Cleopatra Part 1, listen and learn. This is Ancient History Fangirl, by the way.
Not my performance review, where I find out the guest, the severed head of Crassus, is a better co-host than me.
The severed head of Crassus and I are in talks to bring him on permanently.
That sounds about right.
In our last episode, Marc Antony had settled into life in Alexandria as Cleopatra's consort, even as the propaganda war between him and Octavian rose to a fever pitch in Rome. Again and again, Marc Antony's friends begged him to break things off with Cleopatra, and again he refused, even as he continued to shower Cleopatra and their children with honors and provinces. Eventually, Octavian got his hands on Marc Antony's will, read aloud the most damning parts in the Senate, accused Marc Antony and Cleopatra of plotting to take over Rome, and then declared war. Not against Marc Antony, but against Cleopatra.
Here's the thing, though. This war was bullshit.
It was total bullshit.
Absolutely. We call bullshit on your war, Octavian.
We call bullshit over here at Ancient History Fangirl.
And here's why. First off, ancient Rome had a very specific process for declaring war on another country, which Octavian didn't follow, because why would he? Rules are for other men, right, Octavian? We see how you work. Instead, he'd held this quote-unquote ancient ceremony, which involved dipping a spear's point in pig's blood and hurling it in the direction of the country he was declaring war on. He claimed it was a quote-unquote ancient ceremony, but he probably was making it up.
They probably took the patch of sacred ground he was supposed to be hurling his spear at and, put it really close to where he was standing, because Octavian with his scrawny arms, speaking as a fellow scrawny-armed person, I seriously doubt he could hurl a spear that far. And also, he's probably one of the only people in this story who could hurl a spear at the ground and miss.
Aw, and yet, even for all his scrawny arms, he still wound up first emperor of Rome, so there's hope yet, kids.
That's true. If you're scrawny-armed, don't worry, you can still be a dictator.
Whereas those of us with swimmer shoulders, we were just built to be war elephants.
Let's not, put too fine a point on people's body types being their destinies.
I'm just saying, it's okay to also be a war elephant.
It's okay to be whoever you are. Unless you're Octavian, in which case, no, not okay.
Not okay. Go home.
Not okay on so many levels.
Anyway, second, now that we've had our little Octavian rant, second, Octavian didn't specify what Cleopatra did to deserve having war declared on her. Not exactly. He just said he declared war on her for, quote, her acts that went against Roman principles, as Roman wars have to be justified.
The thing is that the justified war in Roman society, the bar on that was quite low.
So if he couldn't even meet that bar, we're just real problems.
Let's just say that this was not some kind of Geneva Convention humanitarian thing. No, it was all very self-serving. But Octavian didn't even meet that criteria.
Shame, Octavian, shame.
Octavian, you are a bad person and you should feel bad.
I want the little bell for him, really.
Shame. Shame!
Anyway, even so, Octavian was the sole power in Rome now, and he'd whipped the Senate up into enough of a frenzy that in 32 BC, they voted to strip Antony of all his authority in Rome and declare him an enemy of the people.
Marc Antony and Cleopatra were still in Athens while all this was happening, and I gotta say that this had to be baffling to Cleopatra in particular because she had never attacked Rome. She'd never done anything wrong.
She just keeps giving them money and devaluing her currency and paying for their wars and giving them grain. Okay, she's in love with Antony, but he's there on Rome's business. What's the big deal?
Cleopatra was a really good client ruler. For a decade or more, she'd kept her country both stable and profitable for the Romans, and it kept that grain flowing in, and all that tribute money. And true, she'd helped Marc Antony raise an army just now, but that army was for Parthia, which is technically Roman business. You could definitely argue that this was also not a justified war under even the low bar of Roman standards.
But the point is, Marc Antony was there to have war with Parthia, so, right? Wasn't he?
The thing is, whenever Marc Antony says he's going to war in Parthia, what he really does is he goes to Athens and fucks off for 3 years. So he was in the midst of that phase.
You would think Octavian would be like, cool, just go fuck off for 3 years while I solidify my power more. And if you think about Parthia and decide to go there, I hope you don't get shot with an arrow.
Anyway, Antony was enraged and bewildered by Octavian's actions. He raged to his friends at Octavian's duplicity, his illegal seizing of Antony's will, and his lack of courage in declaring war against Cleopatra and not him when everyone knew Antony was his real target. Once again, Antony's Roman friends urged him to send Cleopatra back to Egypt. He had to, said the friends. This was a public relations test from Octavian. If Antony kept Cleopatra by his side, he'd be making his choice, clearly showing the Roman public that Cleopatra was far more important to him than they were, and showing them he was willing to go to war voluntarily against Rome on Cleopatra's behalf. Of course, Antony did not send Cleopatra away. He stayed loyal, and that was exactly what Octavian was hoping he'd do.
Going to war against Antony was a gamble for Octavian. Antony was an experienced general who'd learned from Julius Caesar, the greatest military mind ever to walk the earth, according to many historians, and possibly Octavian.
And definitely according to Caesar.
Definitely according to Caesar. We're not going to say his full name again, because that is it's getting close, guys.
I mean, he's listening. He'll pop up at some point. This is a long episode.
Behind Antony stood a massive army on land and at sea, all the might of the vast kingdoms of Asia, the bottomless wealth of Egypt, and a third of the Roman Senate. Octavian's power in Rome wasn't as official as he made it out to be, but Octavian had his own ace in the hole. Ace in the hole? It's ace in the pocket.
It's ace in the hole, Jen.
I've never heard that before.
I've never heard ace in the pocket. Is that a Britishism?
No, it's a card. You have an ace card in your pocket.
You're just gonna say, making you say it.
I'm just gonna say some weird Vermont thing that doesn't exist anywhere but Vermont, but that's fine.
Maybe I made it up, like the Bologna ceremony. I don't know.
I'm just gonna chuck a spear anywhere.
Just chuck a spear and flail your arms and let it land where it may, and call that the sacred ground. Like, I declare war.
Okay, but here's the thing. Octavian had his own ace in the hole, and his name was Agrippa.
Ace in the hole.
I said what you wanted me to say. You can't get upset now.
No, I'm just snorking over here in the corner.
That sounds like I don't know.
I'm just talking about Agrippa now, okay?
Talk about my man Agrippa.
Here's where Agrippa comes into the story. Agrippa was about Octavian's age. He was from humble plebeian origins. His family had not been prominent in public life, but he'd grown up with Octavian. They'd gone to school together, and they'd been close friends since boyhood because they were boyhood friends.
Okay, that's what you do in boyhood.
You have friends, right?
And if you're Octavian, you have one friend.
Just one.
To be fair, if your one friend is Agrippa, that's all you need.
Agrippa may have been the only person who could stand to be around Octavian for any length of time without feeling a need to punch him, which I think is definitely the secret of their relationship. Agrippa and Octavian had both been about 18 years old when Octavian was thrust into power as Julius Caesar's heir. And the only reason these two teenagers weren't immediately eaten alive by the sharks in the ancient Roman shark tank was because, despite their youth, they had extremely complementary talents. Octavian had the diamond-hard political mind. Agrippa was the most talented teenage general since Pompey, the teenage butcher.
Agrippa was the reason Octavian kept winning battles. It was Agrippa who won the Battle of Perugia against Fulvia. In the Battle of Philippi against Brutus and Cassius in 42 BC, Octavian was out sick.
Oh, Captain Bone Spurs over here.
And Agrippa helped Antony drive the assassins to suicide. Oh, and you know how it was Octavian's job to fight Sextus, Pompey's pirate son, which, of course, he would become a pirate after his dad died.
Yeah, total rebellion.
Total rebellion. I mean, he wasn't quite a teenager, but, let's just chalk it up to some life phase.
I think it was the life phase of, his father being defeated in battle and having no way to return to society, and this was basically his only option. It was a pirate's life for Sextus Pompey. Arr.
It was a pirate's life. I'm imagining pantaloons, although I know they didn't wear pantaloons. You don't have to tell me that. I got it, guys. I just wanted to say pantaloons.
Just wanted to work in the mention of pantaloons in our podcast.
As often as possible, as anachronistic as possible.
I think I talked about burlap in the last one, and there was definitely not burlap in ancient Rome. But what the fuck do I know? I'm not a burlap scholar.
Listen, I just defy you to find a word that is just as much fun to say as pantaloons. Just say it, pantaloons, right?
Pantaloons. It is fun.
Are you not entertained?
I am entertained. Can we move on?
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 45% off site-wide, plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Is there a baby in your life who's about to start solid foods? This can be such a confusing and stressful time. As a mom of 7, I really struggled with spoon feeding my oldest baby. But once I realized that babies can safely feed themselves real, wholesome foods using the principles of baby-led weaning, feeding the rest of my babies became an actually enjoyable experience instead of something that I used to dread. Hi, I'm Katie Ferraro, college nutrition professor and dietitian specializing in baby-led weaning, and I host the Baby-Led Weaning Made Easy podcast. Each week, we cover evidence-based, safe infant feeding practices for parents and caregivers of babies who are 6 to 12 months of age. So, if you're confused by all the conflicting info you hear about starting solid foods, or you want easy, actionable tips on how to safely prep food for your baby, or introduce allergenic foods, or figure out when to drop a milk feed, we cover all that and more, plus interviews with the world's leading feeding experts in 2 new episodes each week. Search Baby-Led Weaning wherever you listen to podcasts, and happy feeding.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley Livesey from the History of the Second World War podcast. My podcast is a mostly chronological retelling of the Second World War, and I hope you will join me on a journey through the most cataclysmic conflict in human history, as we try to answer the questions of not just what and where, but how and why. Join me on a journey not just through the famous campaigns, battles, and events, but also on a trip around the globe as we broaden the scope of Second World War history beyond the well-known battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. During weekly episodes, I seek to provide new insight for longtime students of the war, while also being a great jumping-on point for anyone seeking a deeper understanding of the Second World War. This podcast has made it to the invasion of Poland in 1939, and start listening now to find out how the world would find itself embroiled in its second worldwide conflict in just 20 years. You can find History of the Second World War on all major podcast platforms or at historyofthesecondworldwar.
Going back to that time that Octavian was supposed to be defeating Sextus, well, once again, he phoned that in to his bestie, Agrippa. And this was all while Antony was supposed to take care of the Parthians, which he phoned into his good pal, Ventidius. So they both were really good at phoning things in.
At that point, it was 36 BC, and Octavian and Antony were both phoning things in.
They had other things to do. Antony had, like, the city of Athens to get drunk in, and Octavian had the city of Rome to try and rule. And there was Lepidus just going, oh, hamburgers.
Poor Lepidus.
When Julius Caesar died in 44 BC, he left a power vacuum that many different factions tried to fill. The Octavian and Agrippa dream team managed to fight their way to the top, defeating the last of Caesar's assassins and dominating the conservative factions in the Senate. And now they were one of the last standing. It was 31 BC. Octavian and Agrippa were both about 32 years old, and the only other last man standing was Marc Antony. It was time to take him out.
When Marc Antony heard the news that Octavian had finally stopped talking about declaring war and decided to actually do it, he was in a good position to win. He had over 10,000 cavalry, a land army of more than 100,000 troops, although bear in mind, number one, Antony can't count, and number two, the ancient sources are not that good at it either, so take all the numbers with a grain of salt. The numbers are fuzzy, you guys.
The numbers are fuzzy. Anytime you see a number ending in a 0 and a 5, it means they don't have the exact number. They're just rounding it up or down based on who's telling the story and who they're trying to glorify or downplay.
Sounds like a lot. It may not have been that much. Might have been more. Who the fuck knows?
It might have been like 12, because, you know.
Well, it's always 12 to Marc Antony, right? Really big numbers. It's 12.
Or 1,000.
And approximately 500 ships, courtesy of Cleopatra. He's like, thanks, babe. More than 12. All right.
He's like, I can't count that high, but I love it.
In the winter of 31 BC, Antony put those ships to another use, stringing them all along the western coast of Greece to form a defensive line against Octavian and Agrippa. Antony's priority here seems to have been to protect Alexandria. Some historians say it must have been because Cleopatra insisted, but Octavian had declared war on her, not him, so it was reasonable to assume he might attack there first. Agrippa, meanwhile, set up a blockade with his own ships that prevented Antony from moving into Italy. All that winter, Marc Antony and Octavian glared at each other from two sides of the Ionian Sea. Nobody was reading from the Caesar playbook at the moment. Nobody made the first move. It was a tense winter. Antony's client kings flocked to him from all over Asia, and Antony sent vast sums of gold to Rome in order to bribe senators and weaken Octavian's support.
Meanwhile, Octavian expelled all the soothsayers and astrologists from the city of Rome, so he could be the only one in charge of the narrative. He didn't need anyone else casting lots and spreading rumors. And, you know, again, we haven't mentioned this in a while, but the Romans were super superstitious, and bad omens and portents could mean that you would lose the favor of people who should be going to war and backing you. And, you know, that is a way that someone who is a bit crafty, like Julius Caesar, don't say his name again, he would be the sort of person who would definitely massage those soothsayers and omen casters to get the right outcome.
And by massage, we mean bribe.
Yeah, I mean, we do, but I'm trying not to say his name again.
I didn't say his name. I just said bribe.
I know you did. I'm worried he's just going to hear it.
He doesn't care who says his name. He's going to show up when he wants to. You know how he rolls. He shows up when people don't expect him.
And he's always wearing a mustache.
Right. I mean, half the times you guys have heard him, you haven't seen him, but he always shows up disguised as somebody else. It's like, oh, Julius Caesar, I still know it's you.
Everyone knows it's you.
You're disguised as Jen, but I know it's you.
So Antony, in a moment of cleverness, sent a message to the Senate in Rome, promising to restore the Republic within 2 months if he won. Octavian sent a message to Antony asking him for permission to land on the coast a few days' march from his base. He promised they could engage in battle within 5 days. Antony responded by challenging Octavian to a duel. I mean, that's one way to end this whole fight early. And of course, Octavian, out with the sniffles, refused. Dueling? Octavian doesn't duel. Octavian doesn't even really throw spears very well.
He might as well have challenged Marc Antony to a fishing tournament. That would have been good.
I mean, the thing that Marc Antony is calling upon is like that great classical, like when Hector and Achilles are battling outside the gates of Troy moment. That's what he wants. He wants this great, glorious moment. And he also knows I can totally beat Octavian in front of everyone. Won't it be funny? And Octavian's like, you could totally beat me in front of everyone, and that would not be funny. I don't like being laughed at. So a stalemate ensued.
Yeah, why would Octavian say yes to that? There's absolutely nothing in it for him. That's the one fight with Marc Antony he knows he's going to lose, like an actual fight.
And also he knows, like, listen, Agrippa can kick your ass 3 ways to Sunday because Agrippa is Pompey come back to life. Clearly, that's what that is. And, you're still using Papa JC's rule book and everyone's read it by now. At least Agrippa has. Like, they teach it in class, old man. Meanwhile, in Rome, the people hedged their bets. Across the Ionian Sea went a steady stream of spies, messages, and defecting senators on both sides. Nobody knew which way the dice would fall. If you were a member of the senatorial class in ancient Rome at the time, choosing the winning side could be a matter of life or death. Nobody wanted to choose wrong. One man was said to have trained 2 ravens, one to say, "Hail Caesar, our victorious commander," and the other to say, "Hail Antony, our victorious commander."
Caesar is actually Octavian here because he'd been adopted by Julius Caesar and he was going around calling himself Caesar. A few months into the standoff, Agrippa made his move. He made a quick surprise crossing into Greece and captured a southern base. From there, he moved 80,000 troops across from Italy, and suddenly the game was on. Agrippa captured several important towns and supply depots, and Antony was forced north to Actium, a promontory in the Ambracian Gulf in northwestern Greece. Antony's position was too strong to attack outright, and he outnumbered Agrippa on land, but Agrippa dominated at sea, and he managed to cut Antony off from supplies. Agrippa set up a blockade at the mouth of the Gulf and bottled Antony in. For months, into spring and summer, the two sides' land forces maneuvered around each other, skirmishing and disrupting each other's supply lines and calling each other nasty names. At one point, Antony was almost captured in an ambush. Nobody could get the upper hand.
Cleopatra brought several benefits to Marc Antony. First, he couldn't afford this war without her. And also, without her, he wouldn't have a navy. Second, among diverse armies of Macedonians, Medes, Ethiopians, Thracians, and more, Cleopatra was most likely the only person in Marc Antony's camp who spoke everyone's language.
But she had as many enemies as friends in that camp. King Herod was there, for example. King Herod!
Oh, we remember him!
He's back! A longtime ally of Marc Antony, but one who loathed Cleopatra, hated her.
We have a mini-sode. What did we call that one?
Cleopatra and King Herod wouldn't touch you with a barge pole.
Oh, it sounds like they didn't like each other very much, Jenny.
They did not. As of this recording, we have recorded both of those episodes, but I'm not sure if we've published both of those episodes. I think the second one is going to go up after this one goes up.
It depends. If our patrons help us reach our next goal, which is $500 a month, then they will both be out.
That's right. So it might or might not be out by now. That depends on you. So anyway, these two hated each other for pretty spectacular reasons. He actually went so far as to suggest Antony assassinate Cleopatra and take Egypt for himself. Antony kicked him out of camp for daring to make that suggestion. It's nice to see Marc Antony having some boundaries.
I mean, he doesn't have a lot, but when it comes to Cleopatra, talk shit about her and you can get the fuck out of here.
Well, I would say that is not his boundary, but at least in this case.
Not always, but in this case.
There's a lot of wishy-washy shit.
Look, Marc Antony is a fucking pancake. You flip him from side to side.
Oh.
And if you leave him on one side for too long, he burns. And no one wants burnt pancakes.
No one wants burnt Marc Antony.
It was a long, hot, mosquito-infested, frustrating summer. Everyone was on their last nerve. The troops started running out of food. Everyone was hangry, and as Jenny knows, don't ever get me hangry. And as the summer dragged on, everyone, Medes, Thracians, Greeks, Macedonians, Romans, and more, had it up to here with Cleopatra. It's weird because Cleopatra's charm was legendary, but somehow, as spring dragged into summer in that miserable bay, she managed to piss off absolutely everyone in Antony's camp, to the point where people were saying you hadn't really experienced the Battle of Actium if you hadn't taken some of the abuse Cleopatra dished out.
Well, I have to say here, though, I want to interject.
Please do, because my eyes are in the back of my head.
Right, me too. And I just feel like, think about if Cleopatra was a dude, right? Cleopatra is an influential client king. She's the one who supplied all the ships, and she has tactical knowledge. Everyone would be listening to her. I think that the reason people are hating on her right now and why she's being seen as abusive, I mean, and to be fair, she might actually be kind of hard to deal with right now. Like, this situation is hard on everybody. Nobody's listening to her. Everyone wants her to shut up and be pretty and not say anything and not get in the middle of all the generals talking because they're all dudes, and nobody's taking her seriously. And I kind of feel like this is just rampant sexism going on right now.
I feel like there's that, and there's also the fact that Antony is a pancake. But if Cleopatra's there, she's going to make sure you can't flip him. And it would be much easier if Cleopatra went away, because they could definitely flip Antony. Everyone else would have a better say in what he did because, you know, he's very malleable. Hey, they might even be able to walk away from this with not a lot of losses. But if Cleopatra's there, there's going to be a fucking battle, and Antony's going to stay the course.
He's going to stay the course if she's in the same room. If she's gone, you're absolutely right. He's totally going to sway whichever way you tell him to sway.
Here's the thing. There was also an optics problem. Cleopatra slept in a lavish tent, even if she was living rough, because that was living rough for her. Cleopatra's accommodations were probably luxurious compared with ordinary soldiers. Roman troops loved generals who shared in their hardships, slept in ditches with them, and ate the same crappy food. And Cleopatra was not that general. Guys, she is a living goddess, okay?
Right. She's not going to sleep in a ditch, and she's not going to eat the same food. Just forget it.
Forget it. She slept in a silken tent on a soft bed surrounded by barrels and barrels of treasure. She was paying for this army after all. She'd brought her treasury with her. And I think that is also the other thing to bring up. Antony was definitely, I will sleep in a ditch. I will drink the crappy wine. I will gamble with my soldiers. I will be there for that camaraderie. But with Cleopatra, now Antony's sleeping on a freaking silk tent on this beautiful bed. What does he know about what's going on in the camp? He's not walking the camp in a mustache.
He is definitely sleeping in Cleopatra's tent with Cleopatra. He's not sleeping in the ditch with the soldiers. He might be eating with the soldiers, but probably not.
No, he's not eating with the soldiers. He's eating with Cleopatra. And his generals are probably eating with Cleopatra or at his table. And, you know, that creates a very different dynamic when you're looking at how to build your army together.
When your soldiers are suffering, and I don't know how good Julius Caesar was at this. Like, I can't necessarily say that he was the kind of general who ate with the soldiers, but I do know that he was the kind of general who put himself out in front with the soldiers, and that did make a difference with them.
It made a total difference, and I suspect that he probably did eat with the soldiers. Not every night, but enough so that you saw him. Because when they were all, like, at the Battle of Alesia, you would not have fought for him if you didn't feel like, oh, he's enduring the same hardships we are, you know. We're all in this together. We're not going back to Rome unless we're going back on our shields. I mean, that's a Spartan metaphor, but whatever.
Anyway, the months stretched on. Antony's friends, advisors, and client kings pushed him to ditch Cleopatra, and Cleopatra refused to play nice with these people. Stacy Schiff says, quote, friends of Antony and Roman consuls alike suffered at her hands, universally reported to have been, quote, within the quote, abused by Cleopatra. She was vindictive, peremptory, brittle. Experience had not made her any more tractable than she had been as a teenager with her brother's advisors. She was, after all, accustomed to exercising supreme authority, poor at taking orders. I mean, and Stacy Schiff is such an amazing writer. You know, that's probably true about Cleopatra. Like, when she wasn't getting her way and she wanted her way, I'm sure that she made herself impossible to live with until she got her way. But I also do kind of feel like a dude would not get this criticism from these generals.
Well, but also, I think the thing about Cleopatra here is she is not giving even a fucking inch. She's going to sleep in that goddamn tent. She's going to have her luxury. She's got her treasury. She's financing the war. If you've got a problem, take it up with my sack of gold. Most generals wouldn't behave that way. You know, they're very aware of what it means to lead an army. And part of that is actually looking like you're goddamn suffering. Like, we don't see this complaint leveled at Agrippina the Elder. Because Agrippina the Elder, when she was on campaign with Germanicus, he was not living separate. They were living, you know, in a way that the soldiers felt like they were all together. Obviously, the ancient writers have such a slant, but there must have been more extravagance than they would deem necessary for her.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's likely given what we know about Cleopatra. So, an army camp might not have been the most comfortable place for Cleopatra, but she had good reason not to leave. Stacy Schiff points out that she'd been, quote, ill-served by intermediaries. Cleopatra had had the experience of being thrown out of her palace by her own courtiers. Her general in Cyprus had disobeyed her and sent her armies and supplies to the wrong side. She knew that if she wanted things done right, she had to do them herself. Oh God, I feel this so hard. I gotta say, as the person who was like always the kid in group projects at school who had to do all the work while everybody else fucked off, I feel this so fucking hard. Besides, Antony was a people pleaser. She can't leave the room. She can't leave him alone with these guys. None of these dudes surrounding him would hesitate for a single moment before tossing her right under the bus if buses existed. We're aware that they didn't, but maybe under something else like a trireme.
I feel like we have to call it an omnibus, which is where bus comes from, actually.
Under the omnibus. Anyway, like, just, you know, totally sacrifice her on the altar of optics or whatever, even though she's funding the whole war. And she could not necessarily trust Antony not to go along to please them if she wasn't actually right there next to him. As Jen so eloquently described, he was a pancake. Someone else is going to try and flip him. She needed to make sure that didn't happen. Several times in the recent past, he'd wound up agreeing with his friends when they suggested he send her away, and she had to do damage control. I mean, there was somebody in the camp suggesting he assassinate her. Like, yeah, it was Herod, and Antony threw that guy out, but who's to say that everyone wouldn't suggest that later?
True. I mean, I don't blame Cleopatra for being worried, but I also do think that Antony had major Cleopatra blinders, and I don't think he necessarily took the advice perhaps he should have as a result.
That's probably true. Like, I'm not really seeing what the actual military situation was in terms of, like, how smart these generals were about things versus how smart Cleopatra was about things and, like, who was suggesting what. However, I feel for Cleopatra in these situations.
I do too, but I do, like I said, we've seen Agrippina the Elder, we've seen Fulvia, we've seen women who have some kind of military mind, and I'm not sure that's where Cleopatra's strength was.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think she was a warrior.
No, and I think the generals are pointing out this is not her skill set. She's disruptive to the men. This freaking silk tent and everything else is making them wonder if you really understand what you're fighting for and what you're asking them to do.
And also, your intense loyalty to her is causing a major optics problem with people in Rome. So you have to distance yourself from her.
That summer, Cleopatra fought with Antony and his generals constantly. She refused to be deferential to the men. She had strong opinions about how Antony should conduct the battle. Not to mention, she was the reason for this war. A wholly unnecessary person, according to Antony's generals, that Antony was better off without. Everyone kept forgetting that it was Cleopatra who wrote the checks. Even Canidius, the general Cleopatra had bribed to speak to Antony in her favor, urged Antony to ditch Cleopatra and march into Thrace or Macedonia. And when Antony steadfastly refused to get rid of Cleopatra, people who'd been with him since the beginning started defecting to Octavian. Amidst a steady stream of betrayals, Antony started getting paranoid. At one point, he tortured and killed a client king and a senator he suspected of wanting to desert. He even started distrusting Cleopatra, even going so far as to accuse her of trying to poison him. There's a story, probably embellished, of how, when Antony accused her of trying to poison him, Cleopatra prepared a poisoned drink for Antony, then stopped him at the last minute from drinking it. Cleopatra even made a slave down the concoction instead, after which he immediately died. "See," she said to Antony, as his poor slave lay dead on the floor, "I could have poisoned you any time I wanted to. Clearly, I haven't been trying to poison you, or you'd already be dead."
Well, that's so reassuring, Cleo. Thanks.
Oh, Cleopatra, come on.
Jesus fucking Christ. I feel like sometimes I'm laughing because I'm horrified, okay?
Every time you kind of want to feel for her, she does something awful like this, and you're like, seriously?
What the fuck is this?
Why?
Listen, Cleopatra was a living goddess on Earth, and it's fun to be like, yay, women's empowerment, she was a goddess. But one of the downsides of thinking you're a goddess is that you believe you can do anything to anybody.
Yeah, where have we seen that before? Someone later on who also believes he's a god.
So many people that we run into in these stories have this complex. Sickness spread along with the heat and the mosquitoes. By August, the camp had run so low on food that Antony had his soldiers requisition grain from neighboring villages. And, since their beasts of burden were all dying, people to transport them. Plutarch's great-grandfather was from this area, and he used to regale his family with tales of the time he and his friends and neighbors were forced to march over a mountain range with sacks of grain on their backs, driven on by Antony's soldiers and their whips. I kind of love how Plutarch has family members who were kind of in Marc Antony's orbit, although at a very different level of society.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Finally, Antony called a war council. They'd been under blockade for 4 brutal months. This could not continue. They had to make a decision. Was it to be war by land or war by sea? Antony was indecisive about this. His waffling was part of the reason the blockade had lasted so long. The Roman generals argued for a land battle. They were far more comfortable on land. Cleopatra argued just as strongly for a sea battle. She was the one who'd supplied the ships. She knew that if Antony chose land, he'd have to abandon her ships ships and quite possibly her entire treasury to Octavian. It would be next to impossible to transport all her riches by land. There were a lot of riches. If Antony lost to Agrippa and Octavian, they'd turn on Egypt next, and her country would need those ships and that money. She couldn't afford to have Antony sacrifice it all to the enemy outright.
Against the advice of his generals, Antony chose to listen to Cleopatra and have the battle at sea. Plutarch chalks it up to his infatuation. He literally was not capable of saying no to her, but he had sound tactical reasons for wanting a fight at sea. Antony led an army of diverse people who fought in different ways, spoke different languages, and followed different kings. Octavian led a force of Roman troops who all spoke the same language and were drilled in the same system. Antony had seen how this had played out before, twice, at Pharsalus and Alesia. Pompey had an army like Antony's, and he'd lost to Caesar. So had Vercingetorix.
So Julius Caesar, what choice would you have made here, land or sea?
Julius Caesar reluctantly agrees with that scurrilous Marc Antony. I'm glad to see that he learned at least 2 things from me. When you're facing the might of the Roman military and your army is disparate peoples who may or may not be able to follow you, and they have many alliances which may or may not hold true, you should not engage in outright war on land against highly trained legions led by that fabulous up-and-comer Agrippa.
There's something to be said for having a really cohesive force.
Absolutely. Julius Caesar would prefer that 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, but sometimes you just don't have the choice now, do you?
What has Antony been doing all these long months to indoctrinate these people into the Roman way of fighting? How has he been drilling them? How has he been keeping up the morale against the Romans who are there? What has he been doing to get intelligence? We know what happens with Antony when he has time on his own and no one to direct him to do things.
Oh, that's a super good point. I mean, if you look at Vercingetorix, he was drilling his people. He was trying to build a cohesive force. I seriously doubt Antony was doing that.
Absolutely. When you look at the rebel Spartacus, he knew how the Romans fought and he looked for the weaknesses and how they could exploit that. Was Antony doing the same?
I mean, Antony knew the Roman strengths and weaknesses like the back of his hand. Antony was a Roman. He came up in the Roman system. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily know that was even it.
Sea battles were not our strengths, were they?
So what would you have done?
There are too many variables fighting at sea. Reluctantly, one does agree that it is better for the type of army Antony has to fight at sea.
Would you not have just packed up your army and went to find favorable ground? I feel like that's what you would have done.
Well, of course. There's no point staying in a bay where you can easily be surrounded by Agrippa's navy. I would have gone back to somewhere where I could control the odds. I would go somewhere where I could continue to drill my army and ensure that we were able to exploit the Romans in ways that they had not yet seen.
I knew that. I'm in your brain, Julius Caesar.
Oh, I mean, it's a very comfortable place sometimes.
This is disturbing. I'm disturbed. The things I learn about myself in the course of this podcast.
I suspect Julius Caesar would have gone back somewhere like Athens or Alexandria.
Well, maybe Macedonia or Thrace. I'd have to look at a map and see what was like the most convenient.
Julius Caesar would have gone somewhere where his stronghold was secure, where his people were secure, and he would have engaged in a war where he had a much more favorable outcome. I would have made them come to me, and I would have decimated them along the way. That is not what the scoundrel Antony did. It is very difficult to watch someone who you had so much hope for fall quite so quickly.
Well, let's get to that part. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
Miss Williamson, this battle has been long fought and lost many, many years ago.
Storytelling 101, Caesar. We don't want to give anyone spoilers.
Yes, Miss Williamson, I'll go back to watching Nailed It on Netflix.
You and your weird Netflix shows.
Anyway, I'm going to get us back to the story. Julius Caesar, go watch Nailed It. It's good fun. Don't try and bake. We know that's not your forte.
Maybe he's really good at baking now. Julius Caesar, how are your muffins coming?
You can't handle my muffins.
I'm pretty sure I can totally handle your muffins.
No one makes muffins like Julius Caesar.
I would like to verify this myself at some point.
Currently, I'm perfecting a recipe for pumpkin chocolate chip muffins.
I'm coming over. You're making me muffins.
Okay, I'm just going to step in once again and remind you we're recording a podcast.
Jen, I'm trying to have a conversation with Julius Caesar right now. Okay?
Oh, everyone wants to talk to Caesar.
Jen gets really uncomfortable when Julius Caesar and I flirt.
Really do.
I've deleted a lot of the more X-rated flirting that Julius Caesar and I have done.
Just want to keep it to PG.
Except when the horse phallus pops up. I mean, sometimes...
Well, that was not about Julius Caesar. That was Brutus and his wife, Portia. I have no control over what they do.
We were spying on them like Marc Antony spying on a common Alexandrian person on the street.
We were, and we saw horse palace, and we were like, wow.
We were like, oh, well, this is clearly the right household to spy on.
Moving on.
We're moving on.
The UPS Store is making packing and shipping Easter gifts quicker than ever this year with UPS Air. How quick? Quicker than a walk around the park. Quicker than eating all the Easter candies. Quicker than finding a golden egg that you know is stuffed with cash. When you ship UPS Air at the UPS Store, your items arrive on time or your money back. Guaranteed at no extra cost. Exclusively at the UPS Store U.S. retail locations. Send Easter joy on time at the UPS Store. Visit the upsstore.com/air guarantee for full details. Terms and conditions apply.
Not sure how to tackle your taxes? Are you sweating the small print? You may be experiencing FOMO, the fear of messing up. The answer? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They help you get your biggest refund, and then we help you do more with it. With a personalized plan designed to help you hit your money goals. It's time to take your taxes to the max. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
For 4 days, fierce gale-force winds and rain lashed the coast of Greece. But the day of September 2nd, 31 BC, dawned clear and warm, the sea flat as glass. Marc Antony and his fleet arranged themselves at the mouth of the Ambracian Gulf, facing down Agrippa's blockade. Octavian was mostly sitting this one out. He had a blister on his right pinky toe. He had a blister, Jenny. Totally threw off his balance. He was watching from a safe location on the shore. Agrippa's goal was to lure Antony's ships out of the mouth of the Gulf so his own ships could wrap around and flank them, going round the back, which is military history 101 in the ancient world.
It's a vast oversimplification, but basically everyone was trying to go round the back. Ask Mary Beard, she's the one who breaks it down.
Antony's aim was to batter down Agrippa's blockade. He put Cleopatra and her enormous treasury in her massive 10-decker flagship, the Antonia, and set the whole thing behind him in the mouth of the Gulf, with 60 ships to guard her.
So he named his ship the Antonia.
I know, you think he could have named one the Cleopatra, but no. Everything Marc Antony owns either needs to be Antony or Antonius or Antonia or Antoniella.
I mean, how much do you want to bet all the ships in Marc Antony's fleet were named the Antonia?
I'm pretty sure my mother's full Italian name is Antonietta.
Oh man, Marc Antony got to her.
He got to my family, guys.
He's in your family line. Down through the ages. And you, and you, and you will all be named after me.
Slowly, Agrippa backed his ships off, trying to lure Antony out to him, and slowly Antony's ship sailed forward to meet him.
So let's pause for a second to give you a clearer picture of what this naval battle would be like. The warships on both sides of this battle were mighty triremes, and variations on that design. Quintriremes, quadriremes, tetraremes, all the remes. They were massive, deadly, streamlined robot rowboats built to kill. But they weren't robot rowboats. We're just calling them that.
We're calling them that because Jen can't say rowboats.
Because we had this one episode where Jen had to repeat this one sentence with the word rowboat in it because she kept saying robot. Now it's robot rowboats into eternity. Anyway, the triremes had 3 banks of rowers and oars, but that wasn't the only size. A quintreme had 5 banks of rowers. Many of Antony's ships, including Cleopatra's massive flagship, appropriately named the Antonia, had 10 banks of rowers. While these ships did have sails and masts and could be used as sailing ships, in a war situation, they usually took the sails and even the masts and rigging off the ships to allow more room for rowers and soldiers.
The rowers gave the vessels speed and maneuverability and ensured that in a war situation, they were not at the mercy of the winds. In a naval battle, which side won often depended on who was faster and more maneuverable. And to get the advantage, every spare scrap of space on the boats had to be given to rowers. There was no room for supplies, and these were not transport ships. Triremes and their larger cousins often sailed very close to shore and were supported by land armies that carried their supplies.
There were two ways to fight a naval battle in this time period. First, you could build up speed and ram your enemy. Ancient warships were built for this. There was a large bronze-plated battering ram fixed to the front of each ship below the waterline, specifically for ramming. These were called the beaks, and victorious navies would often take the battering rams from the ships of defeated navies and display them in public places. In Rome, bronze beaks from defeated warships decorated the rostra, or speaker's platform. The name rostra meant the beaks.
The second method of winning a naval battle was by boarding. These warships had scant room to carry anyone not engaged in rowing, but the Romans were far more comfortable fighting battles on land than sea, no matter how strong their navies got. Carrying soldiers on board your trireme, squeezing them into every spare inch of space you could find, and getting them onto the enemy ships effectively transformed sea battles into something analogous to land battles, where men could win by fighting hand to hand. Many Roman admirals used this tactic. To board an enemy's trireme, you sail yours close alongside with your oars drawn in, ideally close enough to snap your enemy's oars. This renders them dead in the water and helpless to resist your invasion. Then, you toss over grappling hooks, ladders, and rams to help you get across. From there, your crew fights the enemy's crew, hand to hand, and hopefully your side wins. I mean, this feels like Pirates of the Caribbean to me.
There were other things you could do to sink enemy ships, or if you were about to be boarded, to prevent that from happening. Stuff like shooting flaming missiles on board to set the enemy ship on fire. Things got nasty quickly in these ancient naval battles, which often involved hundreds of ships ramming each other, boarding each other's decks, and slaughtering each other, and setting each other on fire. The sea would have been thick with pieces of ruined boats and corpses of drowned men for weeks after one of these battles, which frequently involved hundreds of ships and thousands of men.
So let's take a look at Antony's fleet and Agrippa's specifically. There were some significant differences between these two fleets. First, Agrippa's fleet was manned by experienced crews. Most of Antony's was comprised of newbies, and some had been press-ganged on, meaning basically kidnapped and forced to row. Antony's sailors were outclassed by Agrippa's. Point to Agrippa.
Second, Antony had bigger ships than Agrippa did. He had a lot more of the 10-decker variety, and while powerful and basically impossible to ram, they were also less maneuverable. As the two navies engaged, Marc Antony's ships attempted to build up ramming speed, but Agrippa's ships refused to stay in one place and let themselves be rammed. I mean, this is kind of 50-50 at this point, right? Agrippa saw that it was useless to try ramming Antony's ships with his smaller ships, but he had more ships than Antony did overall, and they were more maneuverable. Antony's ships were basically sitting ducks for boarding. So, point to Agrippa, I guess? But it's not as weighted. You know, this is like a...
It's like 0.5 to Antony, 0.5 to Agrippa.
Right. This is a pretty close 50-50 thing. And you know, when it's close 50-50 like that, what's really gonna make the difference is how knowledgeable your crews are. So point to Agrippa.
So Agrippa ordered his navy to swarm Antony's ships, 3 or 4 to a 10-decker, throwing ropes and torches and grappling hooks to pin them down and board them. But Antony's ships weren't exactly helpless. They were floating fortresses outfitted with catapults set on wooden towers built on the decks. They fought back. As the two sides made contact, the immense crack of catapults crashing into the hulls of triremes sounded out over the bay. Swords crashed and sails went up in flames with a whoosh as flaming missiles caught in the rigging. Mighty quintremes and quadremes listed to the side and sank with all on board.
Just as things were getting really nasty, a shadow crossed in front of the sun. As everyone on both sides stopped and stared, Cleopatra's great 10-decker warship, the Antonia, glided through the smoke and sparks of battle, through a sea thick with flotsam and the bodies of drowned men, with its purple sails unfurled at the head of a favorable wind, leading her guard of 60 warships. As Marc Antony watched, astonished, she sailed effortlessly through the blockade and away in the direction of Alexandria. Antony immediately jumped in a small, fast ship and chased after her, leaving his navy and land army to their fate. So what the fuck was this, Jen?
Oh my god, Antony just lost everything.
He just bailed. He bailed on everyone.
He fucking bailed on Rome. He bailed on his soldiers. Like, there is no coming back from this.
One of the most important things about being a Roman general, like one of the ethos you're supposed to cleave to, right, is that you never abandon your men. If it looks hopeless, you do what Julius Caesar always did, and you take your ball and you go somewhere else. You take your whole army, you decamp, and you find more favorable ground, and you try to get the enemy to fight you on your terms. You never abandon your men.
The point is, you live, you die, you're all in this together. What he's done is just said, we are not in this together. I'm going with Cleopatra.
So what the hell just happened here? I've seen different writers, like ancient writers and modern writers, try to explain this in different ways. Cassius Dio claims that Cleopatra lost her nerve. He says, quote, Cleopatra, riding at anchor behind the combatants, could not endure the long and anxious waiting until a decision could be reached. But true to her nature as a woman and an Egyptian...
sorry.
Way to fit in racism and sexism in one short sentence.
2 for 1.
Thanks, Dio. Thanks for that. She was tortured by the agony of the long suspense and by the constant and fearful expectation of either possible outcome, and so she suddenly turned to flight.
Other writers say that this was part of the plan all along, that Antony knew he was beaten and never intended to fight, but only to distract Agrippa long enough to break through the blockade with Cleopatra and Cleopatra's money.
Maybe. I mean, what do you think, Jen?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think that was Cleopatra's plan. Whether or not it was Antony's plan, I don't know, because doing this, what Antony's done, there's no one who's going to follow him.
The fact that she had sails on her ships tells me that maybe this was planned, because usually they didn't have sails on the ships. So if they had sails on their ships, maybe they intended to just wait for the right wind as the battle was going on, and they intended to run the blockade while the battle was happening, and Agrippa couldn't stop them.
Maybe, but...
That's one theory that I've seen posited by more modern historians, that this was all part of the grand plan. But then how can you explain why Antony ran after her? Because Antony running after her is basically throwing in the towel early.
It's career suicide, isn't it? You're not going to be able to general again. Who's going to follow you if you would just abandon your men and run after Cleopatra? Like, from a swoon-worthy romantic, it's like, oh, yes, all that for her. But from a pragmatist, I'm like, how are people going to follow you if they don't feel like you're going to fight until you can't fight no more, and then you give the signal and you run back to Alexandria? Like, I don't know. The other problem that we have here is that everything was at stake for Cleopatra. If they lost this battle, next would be Alexandria. And if they don't get back there and fortify Alexandria to their liking or whatever they need to do, that's it. It's over.
It's easy to look at this and be like, wow, swoon, he couldn't stand to lose her. I mean, I feel that, I feel that when I read this story, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, but what's the end game?
I don't know, because, what's coming down to us is not that everyone loved Cleopatra and everyone felt like, okay, this is our stand against Rome and Antony is with us. And if we do this, then, we'll all be together and we'll have a new order. Like, that's not what we're getting from the ancient sources. So I don't know.
And bear in mind that the ancient sources are all extremely biased.
They're all pro-Roman agenda. So we don't know. Maybe Antony and Cleopatra were like, hey, why don't we just take over Rome? It's chaos there anyway.
Like, maybe this was part of a grander plan that we just don't know about because it hasn't come down to us. But it's baffling. My suspicion, and this is a flawed theory, is that the mistake came down to timing. Cleopatra was supposed to run the blockade. That's why all the sails were on all of her ships. Not just her ships, but the 60 warships behind her. That tells me that this was an organizational decision on the top somewhere.
I agree that at some point she was supposed to run that blockade. The most important thing at this point in time for Antony and for the generals and for the ability to carry on war would be to get her and that treasury out of here.
Maybe it wasn't supposed to happen now. Maybe it wasn't supposed to happen for a while. Or maybe Marc Antony was the one who choked when he saw Cleopatra go, and he chased after Cleopatra, fearing more for her safety than that of his men. Or perhaps he saw the naval battle was lost and made a split-second, inadvisable decision. Maybe he thought, this is my only chance to escape. If I stay with this navy now, I'll go down with these ships. Here's the thing, though. Whatever the reason things went down like they did at the Battle of Actium, it seems really clear that it was not according to plan, and it was not according to Antony's plan, based on his behavior later, which we're about to tell you about. Julius Caesar has something to say, I'm sure.
Oh, Miss Williamson. Miss Williamson. Julius Caesar would like to remind you, Antony never has a plan. He just sort of shows up and shit goes down.
He's just improvising at all times, is what you're saying.
Well, either that or he's following the plans of others. He's very good at that. I have no complaints about when he followed direct orders. I mean, he's capable of great things.
It's just his lane has to be very clear.
His lane has to be incredibly clear, Miss Williamson. Otherwise, there is so much room for error. It baffles the great Julius Caesar that Antony would abandon his men. There is so much drilled into him. He was such a great soldier, to break with his men and to go in such a strange manner, I don't know.
Right, you're not supposed to abandon your men.
One can only imagine that he had spent so much time with the glorious Lady Cleopatra that he begun to actually think he was a god.
Oh, do you think that was it?
Perhaps he thought the rules didn't apply to him any longer. Julius Caesar would not like to speculate about the mindset of Marc Antony, but it is heartbreaking to see such a tragic and obvious mistake by one who should have been so skilled at war.
Right. I agree. Fucking A. Every time.
Every time.
Every time. It's embarrassing. I agree with you, Julius Caesar. It's baffling to me, too. So moving on. Antony caught up with Cleopatra's ship and boarded it, and then refused to speak to her out of anger, shame, or both.
I think if this was their plan all along, which evidence suggests it could have been.
I don't know that this was their plan all along. Something was a fuck up here.
Something was a fuck up here, but if this was part of their plan, it might have been that Antony was never as comfortable with it as he said, because what I can see here from a tendency to people please is this is not the outcome he wanted, but also like, I think what made Antony such a great number 2 was if he had an order, he would just do that order. And then he didn't have to think about the consequences because that was the order. Here he has to make a very difficult decision, which is potentially, yeah, they've only been fighting for an hour, but the battle is lost. So now we have to regroup. And part of regrouping means I have to live. And for me to live, all of these people have to die. And I don't think he was comfortable with that in any way, shape, or form. And I think he also knew that it would be incredibly difficult to have an army follow him after making that dramatic and destructive move.
Whoever took the blame for the Battle of Actium, like whoever fucked up here, I don't know. I don't know if it was Cleopatra running the blockade too soon, or maybe she wasn't supposed to run it at all, or maybe Marc Antony choked and maybe this was his way of regrouping, or maybe he was just going after Cleopatra because he was afraid for her safety. There's so much we don't know here that relies on both of these people's psyche, and we're not in their brains. And we're getting it from mostly hostile sources.
Yeah, and we're getting this story from the victor. You know, as far as the victor is concerned, like, of course they made this obvious mistake. No one would make this mistake in their right mind.
Anyway, Antony caught up with Cleopatra's ship and boarded it, and then refused to speak to her out of anger, shame, or both. For 3 days, Marc Antony sat in the prow of Cleopatra's ship, his head in his hands, staring out to sea, brooding in silence. Because right now, something has gone wrong. We don't know whose fault it was or how exactly it worked. We don't know why everyone did what they did in the Battle of Actium. But we know that at this point, Marc Antony is freaking out. This was not according to plan. And I suspect he blames Cleopatra to a certain extent because of the way he's treating her.
I totally think he does.
Yeah. So finally, Cleopatra's ladies-in-waiting coaxed him to talk to her again and persuaded them to eat and sleep together. It was a miserable voyage. News came in that the battle had proceeded without its commander. Antony's captains had managed to hold out heroically until nightfall before being defeated by Agrippa. When Antony and Cleopatra put to shore for supplies, they saw bodies and fragments of ships washing up on shore. Antony had also abandoned a massive land army, and it took a few days for his troops to realize he was gone. When they found out, at first the troops were incredulous. Hadn't Antony faced many other situations far worse than this without flinching? Rumors swept the camps that Antony would return any moment with some new plan in his back pocket. But finally, after about a week, it became clear Antony was not coming back. So Marc Antony's entire land army, over 100,000 strong, defected to Octavian.
So that's it for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the final installment of Cleopatra and Marc Antony, Lovers in a Dangerous Time.
You can catch up with us in the meantime at Ancient Hist Fan on Twitter or at Ancient History Fangirl on Instagram or Facebook.
And you can get more episodes from us in the meantime if you sign up for our Patreon. We've currently got about 5 or 6 episodes for Patreon subscribers, which you can access for $2 a month. And we put up a new one every month. And as soon as you sign up, you get instant access. Such a win.
And it's so great because it means that you get us 3 times a month. So once a week, except 1 week off. We're at just about $200 a month on the Patreon right now as of this recording, which doesn't cover all the expenses for the podcast between the two of us.
It definitely doesn't cover a third of the expenses.
Yeah, we're not making any money off this outfit. Let me tell you what. And once we get to $500 a month, we're committed to producing 2 minisodes a month. We might have reached that goal by the time this goes out, but I kind of doubt it. But you know what? I'm going to stay positive.
Stay positive. What would Cleopatra do?
She'd be planning to drag her ships out into the desert and portage them 40 miles and put them in a whole other ocean. That's what she'd be planning to do.
She'd also be a Ptolemaic patron of our art.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She'd be donating a lot of money to the Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find our Patreon at patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl.
And if you'd like to support the podcast in other ways, check our website at ancienthistoryfangirl.com, where you can find links to our Ko-Fi account where you can buy us a coffee. It's a one-time thing. Or you can check out our merch.
Or if you want to support us in a way that doesn't involve money, leave us a nice review. We love and appreciate every one of those.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Thank you so much.
And if you're not a member, consider joining. Members get extra episodes just for Patreon subscribers, and all our episodes ad-free.
Membership starts at just $2 a month. Go to patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl for more info. And as always, thanks for listening.
Hi there, my name is Derek, and I'm the host of the Hellenistic Age podcast, a history show covering Alexander the Great to Cleopatra. If you can't get enough discussion about ancient history, you can follow me as well in my journey through 300 years and 5,000 miles of the Hellenistic Age. From the Library of Alexandria to the Greek kings of India, you can find these and more by looking for the podcast on the platform of your choice or by heading to www.hellenisticagepodcast.wordpress.com.
How heavy weighs my lord? You always knew it would end this way. Marc Antony dead on the floor of your elegant mausoleum, still warm and bleeding in your arms. You weep yourself hollow while the waves murmur to themselves outside, and your women sit with their heads bowed. But when you raise your eyes, they're dry. You'd known he was doomed, known all these painful weeks after the debacle of Actium, known each time you looked into his dear, earnest face, every time the two of you reached for each other in the dark. Now he's gone, and it's down to you and Octavian. You still have one blade to hold to the empire's throat. Octavian wants your riches, and he'll do anything to get them. You want a life for your children, any way you can get it. You took precautions long ago, sent your son Caesarion out of his reach, squirreled your treasure away in this mausoleum stuffed to the gills with kindling. If Octavian won't promise their future, you'll bar the doors and burn this place down with everything in it, and you won't be sorry. You rise to your feet as your women wail, and you go to the window. The horizon is blue and vast, a mockery. You tried all the escape routes long ago. One by one, they failed you. All but one. Marc Antony made his last stand and failed in spectacular fashion, but you've always had your own weapons, much different than his. Soon you and Octavian will face each other across a genteel dining table, and you will have your own last stand. And then what? You glance down at Marc Antony, the ruin he's made of his guts, his face so calm in death, smoothed of all worries. He's taken the sun and moon with him, taken everything worth fighting for. Who can say what fate Octavian has in mind for you? But one way or another, you'll follow the man you chose. He won't have to wait long. You're coming. I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Mark Camp Count Past 12 Antony.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl.
The drunken Antony and Cleopatra, lovers in a dangerous time where we'll miss them forever, on my chest tattooed edition. I wanted to honor our poor fallen ones.
We both have booze with us because it's our last episode about Cleopatra and Marc Antony, and we pour one out.
That we do. We're going to miss these two.
We are. What are you drinking, Jen?
I am drinking Marks & Spencer brand Californian pink wine here in London.
I'm drinking Austin East ciders, which is it's like a giant 40-sized can. I saw that in the supermarket. I was like, that is a Marc Antony-sized can of booze right there. This is what I need at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon so that it doesn't run too late for Jen.
I'm also not dissolving any pearls into my booze tonight. Sorry, Cleo.
I mean, if I was dissolving pearls, they would be 100% plastic pearls.
I don't know. You can get some cheap freshwater pearls, I think. Or cultured pearls?
I don't think I even have cultured pearls. I'm classy like that.
It might be that cultured pearls are more expensive in freshwater or cheaper. I don't know. I haven't done the research.
We know nothing about pearls, okay? So we're gonna move on.
In our last episode, Marc Antony and Cleopatra finally went to fight the Battle of Actium against Octavian and Agrippa. And let's just say it didn't go well.
It didn't go well for Antony and Cleopatra. I mean...
Oh yeah, it went swimmingly for Octavian and Agrippa.
I mean, they did great. They didn't even get scratched. They were fine.
They were like, we came, we saw, we actiumed.
We did not flail.
We did not flail. Marc Antony came, I saw it flailed.
Definitely flailed on that end.
It ended with Cleopatra fleeing the scene of a naval battle, Marc Antony jumping into his fastest ship to go after her, abandoning a massive navy and land army, and his entire force surrendering to Octavian.
We talk about the reasons Cleopatra may have fled the Battle of Actium and why Marc Antony went after her in the previous episode. Suffice it to say that we have more questions than answers. But eventually, Marc Antony caught up to Cleopatra, boarded her ship, and spent 3 days brooding in the prow. Whatever their reasons, something had gone spectacularly against plan in that battle, and for 3 days, Marc Antony and Cleopatra couldn't even bear to look at each other.
Finally, Cleopatra and Marc Antony came ashore on a flat stretch of beach along the deserted northwestern coast of Egypt, and there they separated. Cleopatra went ahead to Alexandria, and she moved fast because she had to outrace news of her own defeat. If the differing factions in her court found out she and Antony had lost, she might find herself returning to face assassination or insurrection. Cleopatra knew she couldn't give a hint that anything was wrong when she arrived in Alexandria. She wreathed her ships in flowers, stationed flute players and singers on her decks, singing victory songs, and sailed into the bay at Alexandria with her head held high and not a hair out of place. And the minute she landed, before anyone could hear the news of the ruinous defeat, she fired up a round of bloody prescriptions. Everyone at court whose loyalty she doubted got his throat cut or poison in his wine.
Antony, meanwhile, went to Libya. He'd left 4 legions there, and now he needed them. But when he arrived, he found his legions had defected to Octavian. His friends had to persuade him not to kill himself. When Antony returned to Alexandria, he found Cleopatra in a frenzy of manic activity. She'd beheaded Artavasdes, who'd been held in an Alexandrian prison for the past 3 years, and sent his head to one of his rivals in hopes of earning his support, because this is the Ptolemaic love language. Severed limbs.
Absolutely. We've talked about this a lot.
The gesture failed. So Cleopatra set her sights on far-off India, thinking to sail far away from war and enslavement. Her vision was grand and far-reaching. Stacy Schiff says, quote, "In a blind alley, it seemed Cleopatra's nature to envision broad, unbounded horizons. The grandiosity and bravado were staggering." I mean, this is why we have this podcast, is it not, Jen? Because I do the same thing. My mom had cancer, and I was one of her primary caretakers, and I was doing all this grandiose thinking. And I was also taking care of my mom's horse. And I was like, I'm going to enter all these competitions and win all these horse shows, and I'm going to win all these blue ribbons. That was one delusion. And the other one was, I'm going to go get my MFA. There was also the Viking longship.
Oh, yeah, that was my favorite. Jenny was going to run away and row across to Scandinavia in a Viking longship.
And this wasn't unreal. Like, I had been to this, it's like they called it a regatta, but it wasn't really a race. It was just kind of a sailing get-together with a bunch of people. My dad he builds sailboats.
Captain Tom is a sailboat enthusiast.
Historic wooden boat enthusiast. We did like a sort of gathering of historic wooden boat enthusiasts up in Maine, and there were a bunch of people there who were kind of members of the tall ship community and knew people who were on these historic longships crewing them, and I was just like, I'm gonna do that. The biggest one is the Harold Hardrada. I know I'm screwing that up, which was parked in Mystic for a long time. I'm not sure where it is now, but I went to visit it in Mystic and tried to get the expedition planner to take me on, and he took one look at me and my purple hair and my 0 tall ship sailing experience and was like, no.
And your scrawny arms.
Right. No, not gonna lie, I'm sure. I was like, you look like Octavian arms. You can't come on the longship, Octavian.
The reality is, our nickname for Jenny, me and a few of our college friends, was Jenny Patra, because really, Jenny could convince most people to do most things, so I don't know what happened there, Jenny Patra.
I'm a shoo-in.
I'm already one glass of wine in. My next glass is water.
I've just had a few sips of my massive Marc Antony-sized can.
I mean, I love that you think that I wasn't drinking while freaking out over the internet problem. Anyway.
All fun things that happen behind the scenes. Ancient history fangirl. I'm just saying, like, I really deeply relate to the manic grandiosity when you're in a desperate place.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Cleopatra is the sort of person who must keep going. Like, there is no stopping. If I stop, that's it. I'm done. And Antony is one of those people who's like, I'm so overwhelmed by everything in front of me. And I'm like, I get it.
Jen so relates to Marc Antony in this story, and I so relate to Cleopatra. I love it.
I mean, that does not speak highly for the future of this podcast.
It's all going to end in the mausoleum, Jen.
It better not.
No, we have to envision a better future.
Moving on, please.
So Cleopatra led a bold new project in the interest of sailing off to India, and that was to lift her entire fleet of 60 massive warships out of the Mediterranean and have them transported 40 miles overland through difficult desert terrain to be relaunched in the Red Sea.
That is bold, Cleo.
That's super bold.
But it was not to be. Cleopatra had recently antagonized the Nabateans, a tribe in the area, by getting them involved in a war with King Herod. It's a long story, kind of a rabbit hole. We went down it in Cleopatra and King Herod. Wouldn't touch you with the barge pole, parts 1 and 2. But suffice it to say, they were not fans of Cleopatra. Anyway, they put the brakes on her grandiose plan. One by one, as her ships were hauled ashore, the Nabateans set them on fire. Her giant portage plan in ashes, Cleopatra looked northwest. What if she and Antony tried Spain? She had heard Spain had silver mines. They could go via the Indian Ocean, circumnavigating the Horn of Africa, and found a new kingdom there. What did he think? Marc Antony did not want to hear any of this. He ordered a causeway built into the middle of the Alexandrian harbor. At the end of it, he had a hut built. He crawled inside and built a blanket fort.
He brooded over all the friends who deserted him in his time of need. He lashed himself over his grand failures. He stared out to sea and felt very sorry for himself. Finally, he let himself be coaxed back to the palace by Cleopatra.
That's actually medically called rumination, and it's really common in depression.
Oh, I bet that's what was going on.
He fell into a massive depression, and he was ruminating over all of his past failures, and he literally cannot get around them. Like, it's just awful when it happens. There is nothing he can do to get over it.
As Stacy Schiff tells us, Cleopatra now had 2 jobs: to figure out how to get her and Antony out of this mess, and to prop Antony up. In the wake of the Battle of Actium, Antony had fallen apart. It was now down to her. He'd fallen into a deep depression. I don't want to throw around these modern terms because we can't really, as you've said before, Jen, we can't really diagnose people from thousands of years ago.
We can't. No, and we're also not psychiatrists.
Actually, not even historians.
I know. Whenever anyone says, oh, you're historians, I'm like, no, we're not.
We can't diagnose people from thousands of years ago, but I do feel like I'm seeing Cleopatra in kind of a manic state and Antony in kind of a depressive state at the moment if we were going to diagnose people, which I was like, oh, I'm not going to diagnose people. And then I proceeded to diagnose them. Sorry.
The thing is, that is part of the reasons why they work so well, but also we are seeing them through the lens of historians and people like Shakespeare and artists who have depicted them this way as well. So it is difficult to know.
I think we're also seeing them through the lens of our own experience. I think we both see ourselves in this right now. So anyway, but nobody else wanted to bet their lives on Cleopatra's grand plans. As she plotted, Cleopatra's palace emptied out at an alarming rate. Everyone, right down to her children's tutors, were defecting to Octavian. She kept it from Antony as much as possible so as not to upset him.
Meanwhile, Antony began to enter a new stage of grief. The stage where you throw lavish dinner parties and drink yourself into a stupor. Once again, Marc Antony dusted out his Dionysus costume and began planning elaborate feasts and bestowing extravagant gifts on his friends. Or, I guess, like the 2 people who were actually left in the palace at this point.
You know what it reminds me of? Russian Doll.
Oh, I saw some of Russian Doll.
Russian Doll is kind of like it's on Netflix, a really fantastic show. It's kind of like a modern Groundhog Day. And the main character keeps dying and waking up again at this birthday party that her friend is throwing her. And the party is a little bit different every time she wakes up, and it kind of empties out progressively until the only person at the party is the one throwing it, kind of dancing in the middle of this grand room. It's just this really eerie scene. And that's what this kind of reminds me of. Like everyone emptying out of Cleopatra and Marc Antony's grand palace. They have this history of the inimitable livers and these incredible lavish feasts with all these guests. And it gradually empties out until they're the only ones left.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so sad. So Antony threw a coming-of-age party for his son Antyllus, which means the archer, doesn't it?
His real name was Antonius.
Antonius Antyllus, right?
Yeah, and his nickname was Antyllus.
He threw a coming-of-age party for his son Antyllus and Cleopatra's son Caesarion that lasted for days. The boys were about 15 and 16 now. The inimitable Liffers Club was dissolved.
Inimitable.
To be replaced by a new club called Partners in Death. I mean, it's a bit on the nose.
It's a bit morbid.
The members of this club, quote, passed the time delightfully in a round of suppers, but it had darker purposes. They also entered into a suicide pact.
And here's your warning. We are going to be talking about suicide in the paragraphs coming up.
Plutarch tells us that now Cleopatra started getting interested in poisons, testing them on prisoners who were already sentenced to death. She noticed that the faster acting the poison, the more painful it was, and that the asp in particular delivered a death characterized by, quote, sleepy torpor and sinking, where there was no spasm or groan, but a gentle perspiration on the face. And we talk about this in more details in one of our favorite episodes, Locusta the Poisoner.
Meanwhile, Octavian was back in Rome, solidifying his power for good. He knew he could pick Egypt off anytime he wanted. He wasn't in a hurry. And over the coming months, both Antony and Cleopatra sent a number of messages to Octavian to negotiate for their lives, separately. Antony asked for permission to live as a private citizen in Egypt, or if that wasn't acceptable, in Athens. He reminded Octavian of their family connections, their youthful pranks as younger men, the good times they'd had before all of this went sour.
Eventually, so many people deserted Antony that he didn't even have anyone to send messages. So he sent his 15-year-old son Antyllus to Octavian with a message and an armload of gold. Octavian took the gold and sent Antyllus away without responding to his proposal. Finally, Antony offered to commit suicide if Octavian would spare Cleopatra. Like all his other proposals, it was met with stony silence. Meanwhile, Cleopatra begged Octavian via messenger to allow her to pass down her kingdom to her children. She offered to abdicate in favor of Caesarion. She even sent a golden crown, throne, and scepter, once despised emblems of kingship, to Octavian.
The thing was, Octavian couldn't let Caesarion rule Egypt. Caesarion had been acknowledged as Caesar's rightful son, which made him more legitimate than Octavian. That was a dangerous threat to the legion's loyalty. And giving a rival that dangerous all the power and wealth of Egypt was just asking to be overthrown. Regardless of who ruled Egypt, it was dangerous just to let Caesarion live. Publicly, Octavian bellowed his disapproval of Cleopatra, lobbing insults and threats toward Egypt. Privately, he adopted a tone of utmost reason. Cleopatra could stay if she would have Antony murdered or maybe exiled. The truth was that Cleopatra still had something Octavian wanted, her money. The Ptolemaic wealth was legendary, and Octavian wanted that wealth.
And Cleopatra knew it. Around this time, she ordered a stylish 2-story mausoleum built for herself. And even as she negotiated with Octavian, she had all of her wealth moved into her tomb, with piles of flammable kindling placed strategically everywhere. She didn't bother to hide it. The threat was clear. If she didn't get what she wanted, she wasn't so attached to her own life. She was entirely ready to go into that mausoleum with all that treasure, bar the door, and burn the whole thing down. Octavian was willing to hold out hope for Cleopatra to keep her from torching her treasure, but Antony had nothing Octavian wanted. All his entreaties were met with pointed silence. Sometimes Octavian put his emissaries to death, just because he was also a dick.
Finally, worried that Cleopatra might be close to carrying out her threats, Octavian sent her a messenger of his own, a man named Thyrsis.
That sounds like Thirst Trap to me.
We're just going to call him Thirst Trap. And it's actually kind of appropriate because Thirst Trap was eloquent, persuasive, and apparently very attractive.
You know what? Good strategy, Octavian.
Octavian, who believed there was absolutely no limit to Cleopatra's vanity, gave Thirst Trap orders to... Thirst Trap. Orders, this is exactly what he is. Orders to flatter Cleopatra, compliment her, give her hope, and convince her that Octavian himself was madly in love with her from afar.
Ugh.
Dio says Octavian thought this would work because Cleopatra, quote, thought it her due to be loved by all mankind. I call bullshit.
Bull fucking shit, Octavian.
She did not believe a word of this. First off, Octavian didn't love anybody. Let's get that out there.
No way.
Fuck that.
Fuck that noise. That didn't happen. Jog on, Octavian.
Forget it. But she did spend a lot of time alone with Thirst Trap.
I bet she did.
He was easy on the eyes.
To be fair, at this moment, Antony is in a deep, if not depressive, but a deep sadness where he's probably not really a lot of fun to be around. And also, coming from a personal place, a lot of depressive people will isolate themselves.
You totally see Antony doing this. He isolates himself. Like when he's in the throes of the worst points of his life, that's what he does.
A lot of times it requires a lot of energy just to put clothes on or brush your teeth or just to be in the world. That's where Antony is. And Cleo is the complete opposite. She's like, gotta keep moving, gotta keep doing things, gotta keep planning, because that is a different way of coping.
They're both in the same spot, and they're both coping very differently. And I think Cleopatra's really trying with Antony now. Like, I don't think she's avoiding him.
I don't think he wants to see her. I don't think he wants to see anyone. Like, when you're in that deep place with the rumination and everything else, it is really, really difficult to deal with people in general.
Anyway, so Cleopatra was spending a lot of time with Thirst Trap, possibly because Antony was in a deep depression and was avoiding her, possibly because she was trying to find out anything she could use on Octavian. That's another thing. It might have been strategic on her part.
Absolutely. So all this time being spent with Thirst Trap drove Antony absolutely bonkers with jealousy. Antony had Thirst Trap dragged out of Cleopatra's rooms, beaten and whipped, and sent back to Octavian with a message. Antony was already in a shitty mood, and Thirst Trap had irritated his absolute last nerve. If Octavian didn't like the stripes on Thirst Trap's back, he could take it out of one of the many people who defected from Antony's camp to his. And you can see a pattern here. Cleopatra and Antony weren't working together. They were talking to Octavian separately, and Octavian was trying to turn them against each other. Or at least, he was trying this on Cleopatra, because remember, he wasn't talking to Antony at all. And I cannot imagine how much that must have grated Antony. The way he's treating Antony as if actually answering him is beneath him. Oh, for an ego of a Roman general, someone who served with Julius Caesar, he must have been fuming.
On the other hand, when Julius Caesar left Octavian all his money, Antony took it.
Yeah, Antony was like, fuck that noise.
He just out and out took it. You go all the way back. Octavian did have a few legitimate beefs here. Antony was not pure as the driven snow.
Octavian was legitimately pissed off. Also, he's fucked off to Egypt, taken all their wealth, and left his sister the laughingstock of Rome.
We could talk ourselves into siding with anyone here at Ancient History Fangirl, is what we're saying.
We've got great emotional intelligence.
I guess you could call it that, or just we're pancakes and it's super easy to flip us.
So it's possible that this was all tactical, that Antony and Cleopatra had talked about it and decided they both had better chances if they tried to negotiate with Octavian separately. But Antony's raging jealousy here is a clear hint of insecurity. It's also quite possible that Cleopatra had made the cold-eyed judgment that she and her kids had better chances if she could negotiate some kind of deal separately with Octavian.
But Cleopatra didn't kill Marc Antony or cast him out, and she continued to do what she always had with Marc Antony, pulling out all the stops and stage managing things so he had a really good time. In these difficult months, she showered him with love and attention and comfort. Marc Antony's birthday was January 14th, and when it came, she threw a massive party. He was 53. When her own 38th birthday came a few months later, she barely even celebrated. A lot of writers, especially ancient writers, paint Cleopatra as a cold, calculating woman who seduced men purely for her own benefit. And she's definitely tactical in terms of who she chooses to align herself with. Let's be real.
What other choice did she have?
Right, she didn't have a lot of choice. But this is another point in history where Cleopatra very easily could have poisoned Marc Antony if she wanted to.
Yeah, she could have sorted that problem out real quickly.
She could have. Marc Antony was dead weight at this point. He was useless. He could bring her no more benefits in Rome. In fact, he was a liability. It would have been relatively easy for Cleopatra to take Octavian's deal and have Antony killed or exiled in exchange for her life. Antony was basically doomed, and so was she, but unlike Antony, she had a kingdom to preserve for her children. But she didn't take Octavian's deal, either because she didn't believe Octavian would hold up his end of the bargain.
Likely.
Right. Or because she loved Marc Antony and wanted to protect him as long as she could. Also likely.
Yeah, and also she wasn't born yesterday. She had seen her sister walk in a triumph. She knew what happened when Roman generals win.
I don't think either of these options are mutually exclusive here.
No.
So good, so good, so good.
Spring styles are at Nordstrom Rack stores now, and they're up to 60% off. Stock up and save on Rag & Bone, Madewell, Vince, All Saints, and more of your favorites.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas.
Why do we rack? For the hottest deals.
Just so many good brands.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
This episode is brought to you by White Claw Surge. Nice choice hitting up this podcast. No surprises. You're all about diving into tastes everyone in the room can enjoy. Just like White Claw Surge. It's for celebrating those moments when connections have been made and the night's just begun. With bold flavors and 8% alcohol by volume, unleash the night. Unleash White Claw Surge. Please drink responsibly. Hard seltzer with flavors. 8% alcohol by volume. White Claw Seltzer Works. Chicago, Illinois.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
That winter, Octavian built up his strength. In the summer, he moved fast, crossing into Egypt from 2 directions. His land army came in from the west, supported by a navy. Some of Antony's own legions were in that army. Antony had only a small force he'd managed to scrounge together that wasn't close to big enough. Even so, he rode out to meet Octavian's army, hoping he could convince his men to switch sides. Octavian's commander had his trumpeters blow a loud fanfare to drown out his words. Antony attacked Octavian's forces and was beaten back.
Meanwhile, Agrippa's navy trapped Antony's remaining ships in the Alexandrian harbor by stretching a chain across the mouth and pulling it taut. Where have we seen that before?
Feel like Game of Thrones Season 2? Was it Blackwater? Was Tyrion Lannister just taking a play out of Agrippa's handbook?
I think that Tyrion Lannister was taking a play out of Agrippa's handbook.
Yes.
Anyway, as he returned from a humiliating defeat, Antony ran into Octavian's cavalry, managing to pursue a small group of them all the way back to the enemy camp. Antony had his soldiers shoot arrows into Octavian's camp with messages tied to them offering 1,500 denarii to any who defected to his side. Nobody took him up on it. Are you surprised, Jen? Are you shocked? Shocker. I mean, Marc Antony is really a sinking ship at this point. He is listing to the side and going down.
The rats are even leaving.
No one's jumping on there. There was nothing particularly worth celebrating here. However, Antony was in deep delusional denial. He galloped into Alexandria as if he'd won a massive victory, swept Cleopatra into his arms and kissed her, still in his armor and dusty from the battle. Then he presented to her one of the soldiers who'd fought the most bravely. Cleopatra was gracious. She awarded the man with a golden helmet and breastplate. He politely accepted these gifts, and then that night he snuck away to join Octavian.
The next morning, Marc Antony sent messages to Octavian, challenging him once again to single combat.
Why would he say yes to that? Why?
I know, Octavian's answer was chilling. He shot back that there were many ways Marc Antony might die.
I don't actually need to lift a finger to kill you, Marc Antony.
Oh, you are so toast. And I think that's when it finally sank in for Marc Antony that he was doomed.
You're toast.
He was a burnt pancake.
Poor Marc Antony. We left him on the griddle too long.
He's still a dick.
It's the ancient world and everyone was trash. You just have to accept that.
On the eve before the final battle, the partners in death held one last supper, as luxurious as any that had come before. But it was hard for the diners to keep a brave face, with Antony going on about his wish for a heroic death. He told his slaves to pour one out for him, because who knew whether tomorrow they'd be serving other masters, while he himself would be, quote, a mummy and a nothing. Everybody wept. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, it's said the sound of music, chanting, and flutes sounded throughout the city in a procession. Though there was no one singing and playing, the phantom revelry moved through the city and out the gates, as if Dionysus himself was abandoning Alexandria. And I have to just stop for a minute. That really gets me.
You okay?
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. At dawn, Antony sent infantry on the hilltops before the city and watched as his ships sailed out into the harbor to attack the enemy. But instead of entering into battle, his ships pulled up their oars, saluted Octavian's fleet, and defected before his eyes. His cavalry followed suit almost immediately after. Once again, Antony galloped back through the gates of Alexandria, and this time he was alone. In a haze of madness, he roared at the top of his lungs that the cause was lost, and Cleopatra had betrayed him. Cleopatra fled in fear, barricaded herself in her tomb, and sent a servant with a message telling Marc Antony that she was dead. So I struggle with this, Jen. Why would she send this message to Marc Antony that she was dead? Because she had to know that if she told him that, he would commit suicide.
I mean, here's the thing, Jenny. We don't know how violent he was in this moment. We don't know how he reacted to this loss. We know that he believes Cleopatra has betrayed him. Everyone has betrayed him. There's a sense of paranoia and terror and fear.
And it's not the first time he's believed Cleopatra betrayed him. Like, his mistrust extends even to her.
I mean, also, there's nothing left for her to do to prove she hasn't betrayed him. What's she gonna do at this point? Last time she showed him, look, I can poison people. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. At this point in time, what he knows is he is dead. One way or another. There's no negotiating with Octavian. And if he really believes the woman he's abandoned everything for, the woman he's come all this way for, has betrayed him, who knows how he reacted?
This is a really desperate situation for Cleopatra, and one of the ways that she can save her children now. Octavian's been offering her this deal the whole time. If you get rid of Antony, I'll spare you and I'll spare your kids. And she might be looking at the writing on the wall and thinking, maybe it's time to take that deal. Maybe it's time to sacrifice Marc Antony. I've protected him as long as I could.
Yeah, longer than most people would. At this point in time, Cleopatra has to decide, is it more likely that if she says she's dead, that Antony will kill himself and it will give her a chance to salvage things for her children and Antony's children? Some historians suggest she was detaching her fate from his. This was part of a secret pact she'd made with Octavian. Antony had to die so she could live, or at least so her children could go on ruling in Egypt. And her children also included Antony's children. Other writers point to a larger conspiracy. Octavian's army had entered into Egypt without resistance. Cities that should have fought folded. Even Antony's ships, which were Cleopatra's ships, surrendered without a fight. To these writers, Cleopatra had secretly given those orders, surrendering the country to Octavian. And that makes sense. Looking at it from that point of view, of course Antony feels like he's been abandoned by Cleopatra.
Right, like maybe he was watching all this military stuff happen and thinking, Cleopatra must be behind this. This must be why nobody's fighting. But on the other hand, nobody's fighting because no one will follow Antony.
Yeah, because he ran off in the last big battle.
Right, like there are other explanations besides Cleopatra's doing him dirty. People know a lost cause when they see one.
From here on out, we're going to be talking about suicide, and it's going to go on until the end of the episode.
It's pretty graphic, so if that is not something you'd like to listen to, here's your warning. It said that when Antony received the note that Cleo was dead, he was in his own chambers with his remaining military staff, and he was heartbroken, lamenting only that Cleopatra had proven braver than he was, that she'd had the nerve to do it before he could, but she wouldn't have to wait long. He was coming. It wasn't the first time Antony asked his soldiers, bodyguard, and friends with military experience to do him in. It had happened in Parthia when he'd been at the end of his rope. It had happened again when he'd found his 4 remaining legions in Libya had defected to Octavian. Now, all he had was a slave named Eros who had no military training. Eros is the god of erotic love, not equipped to stab people in the heart. At least by the name. I mean, I don't know Eros. Maybe he really knew how to do this.
Maybe he was so fed up with Antony, he was like, yes, please, but it doesn't sound that way. So Antony begged Eros to do it. Eros, according to Plutarch, picked up Antony's sword, but in the end turned it upon himself. Antony praised Eros for having the courage to show him the way. He then took up the bloody sword and stabbed himself in the stomach. But Antony botched the job. He fell upon a couch, writhing in pain, and pleaded with bystanders to finish him off. But everyone fled, and he lay by himself, screaming and twisting in agony, until his secretary came barging in with news. The message was wrong. Cleopatra was alive. He was ordered to bring Antony to her.
Somehow, with his stomach open and his guts hanging out, Marc Antony's friends and servants managed to carry him to Cleopatra's tomb. Plutarch tells us what happened next. Quote, Cleopatra would not open the doors, but showed herself at a window from which she let down ropes and cords. To these Antony was fastened, and she drew him up herself, with the aid of the 2 women whom alone she had admitted with her into the tomb. Never, as those who were present tell us, was there a more piteous sight. Smeared with blood and struggling with death, he was drawn up, stretching out his hands to her, even as he dangled in the air. For the task was not an easy one for the women, and scarcely could Cleopatra, with clinging hands and strained face, pull up the rope, while those below called out encouragement to her and shared her agony.
Finally, Cleopatra managed to drag Marc Antony in through the window. She laid him on the floor and wept, beating and tearing at her breasts in grief. And once again, poor breasts.
I know, we talked about this in one of our episodes. I think it was one of the Vercingetorix episodes. The phenomenon of women bearing their breasts in extreme circumstances and what that is and where that comes from and why and how much. We didn't really have any good answers for that. We were just very baffled by it.
Anyway, returning to our story, Cleopatra wiped blood off his face, called him master and husband and commander. She, quote, forgot her ills in pity for his. Antony stayed calm. He called for wine and begged Cleopatra to do whatever she could to assure her own safety. Among Octavian's retinue, he told her to put her trust in a man named Proculius and him alone. He bid her not to weep for him, but be glad for the amazing life they'd shared. He'd had a really good run. He'd been conquered by a worthy Roman foe. It could have been a lot worse. Antony died in Cleopatra's arms.
The thing I love about Plutarch is that he keeps pulling up these family stories from people who knew Marc Antony or who served with Marc Antony or who were under him in some way. And he was like the grandson of people who knew Marc Antony, or great-grandson, I'm not exactly sure. Like, I love that, and that's why I kind of trust things that he says, although he also kind of goes on these flights of negativity about Cleopatra a lot. He talks about in that paragraph people who were there. So he was drawing from possibly witnesses. So Shakespeare, in his play Antony and Cleopatra, dramatizes this scene, and he draws from Plutarch, from the scene I had just read you from Plutarch directly. And I had found this scene, and I showed it to Jen, and we read it to each other in rehearsal, and it was just this really powerful moment, so I felt like we should read it to you. How do you feel about that, Jen?
I'm down. I mean, anytime I get to talk about Shakespeare also makes me happy.
So, how about it? Do you want to be Antony and I'll be Cleopatra, since those are the ones we identify with?
Oh, Jenny Patra, I would never take that from you.
Well, you also get the death scene, so... So we're going to start at the part where Marc Antony is brought in, where Cleopatra is just trying to pull Antony up on these pulleys or on this scaffolding, because I guess this mausoleum is still under construction. So she's trying to pull Marc Antony up to her window. And Charmian and Iris are her serving maids, the only two people she's allowed to be in the mausoleum with her. So that's all you need to know for this scene. O sun, burn the great sphere thou movest in, darkling stand the varying shore o'er the wind. O Antony, 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 help Charmian, help Iris, help, help friends below, let's draw him hither.
Peace. Not Caesar's valor hath overthrown Antony, but Antony's has triumph on itself. I mean, he is so his own worst enemy. Oh, Antony.
I mean, I think that's such a true thing about Antony, is he's always his own worst enemy. Point to Shakespeare.
I am dying, Egypt dying. Only I hear importune death awhile, until of many thousand kisses the poor last I lay upon thy lips.
So it should be that none but Antony should conquer Antony. But woe, 'tis so.
Oh, quick, or I am gone.
I dare not, dear, dear my lord, pardon, I dare not, lest I be taken. Not the imperious show of the full fortune Caesar ever shall be broached with me. If knife, drugs, serpents have edge, sting, or operation, I am safe. Your wife Octavia, with her modest eyes and still conclusion, shall acquire no honor demurring upon me. But come, come, Antony, help me, my women, we must draw thee up. Assist, good friends. Here's sport indeed. How heavy weighs my lord. Our strength is all gone into heaviness that makes the weight. Had I great Juno's power, the strong-winged Mercury should fetch thee up and set thee by Jove's side. Yet come a little. Wishes were ever fools. Oh, come, come, come. And welcome, welcome, die where thou hast lived. Quicken with kissing, had my lips that power, thus I would wear them out.
I am dying, Egypt, dying. Give me some wine and let me speak a little.
No, let me speak. She cuts him off. I love it.
I love it.
And let me rail so high that the false housewife Fortune break her wheel, provoked by my offense.
One word, sweet queen, of Caesar seek your honor with your safety. Oh.
They do not go together.
Gentle, hear me. None about Caesar trust but Proculius.
My resolution and my hands I'll trust, none about Caesar.
The miserable change now at my end, lament nor sorrow at, but please your thoughts, in feeding them with those my former fortunes wherein I lived, the greatest prince of the world, the noblest, and do now not basely die, not cowardly put off my helmet to my countrymen, a Roman by a Roman, valiantly vanquished, now my spirit is going, I can no more.
Noblest of men, won't die? Hast thou no care of me? Shall I abide in this dull world, which in thy absence is no better than a sty? Oh, see, my women! The crown of the earth doth melt, my lord! Oh, withered is the garland of the war! The soldier's pole is fallen, young boys and girls are level now with men, the odds is gone, and there is nothing left remarkable beneath the visiting moon. So, I just found that very moving.
It was super moving. I mean, Marc Antony is a deeply flawed individual, and I will never stop saying that, but man.
He was a hardcore romantic. You have to love him for that.
You do have to love him for that.
He was so flawed, and we definitely harp on his flaws throughout every single episode in which we talk about him, but I feel like he'll love you unto death.
Unless you're Fulvia. And even then, that broke his heart having to do what he did to Fulvia.
He was cheating on her with Cleopatra at the time, but maybe he kind of had a poly heart so he could love both of them at the same time. I don't really know.
Maybe, and also he's a pancake. If he'd been back with Fulvia, he would have flipped back to that side.
Marc Antony loves the one he's with.
I mean, there's a great song about that too.
Right. He'll love the one he's with unto death.
I do think there were many times he could have thrown Cleopatra over. Many times it behooved him to throw her over. And he didn't.
Came real close, though.
He came real close, but he didn't.
Mostly because she was in the room with him.
Mostly, but also could have. It would have taken but a minute.
All he had to do was say yes instead of saying no at a certain point in time. There are all these decisions down the line of Marc Antony's decisions where this could have turned.
He loved her. He loved her more than was reasonable. He loved her more than was sensible.
He was following his heart.
Absolutely.
So, meanwhile, one of Marc Antony's entourage managed to get his hands on the sword Antony used to kill himself and secreted it to Octavian. Showing him the blood-covered blade, he brought the news that Antony had committed suicide. Plutarch tells us that Octavian made a big show of retreating to his tent and weeping at the news, just as Caesar had when he got the news about Pompey's murder, but he wasn't as good at faking tears as Caesar.
Julius Caesar would like to remind you that he did not fake tears at the death of Pompey. Pompey had been at one point in time a beloved son-in-law, a triumvir, someone who Julius Caesar had deeply respected. The young Octavian felt no such feelings towards Antony, and it would be criminal to assume that we were of a like here.
All right, so maybe I was a little unfair to you, Julius Caesar. I don't want to go down this whole rabbit hole, but what was the end game for Pompey? I mean, you had to have him killed.
Killed or exiled, but not on a beach, as he's looking to find refuge. Not so demoralizing and dehumanizing. Not for someone of his class. Not for someone who'd done so much for Rome. The Romans would not have stood for it.
So it wasn't the death in general, it was the indignity of the death.
The indignity of the death and the fact that Julius Caesar never had a moment to say goodbye to his dear friend. To forgive Pompey for what he'd done.
He was going to get the axe, though.
Very likely he would have got the axe. It would be impossible to keep him alive, but he could have exiled somewhere for a while and then quietly disappeared one day.
Oh, right. You could just send him the knife in the dark or maybe starve him to death. I mean, that's great. That's better.
Starvation to death would not have been what Julius Caesar would have done. That is not mercy, but a knife eventually.
Okay, Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar's idea of mercy. We're moving on. So Octavian has just retreated to his tent to cry over Antony, taking a page from the Caesar playbook. No, Julius Caesar, this is not an opportunity to jump back in. We've heard from you already. But, like I said, he wasn't as good as this as Julius Caesar. Maybe Julius Caesar really did feel things when he cried for Pompey. I don't know. He says he does. Don't trust anything Julius Caesar says. But Octavian sure didn't, because soon he was storming back out of his tent, waving a fistful of letters he and Marc Antony had sent back and forth. He insisted on reading these to his friends, pointing out how reasonable he'd been this whole time and how much of a rude asshat Marc Antony had been. And we've read you a letter from Marc Antony. He could be a rude asshat. See, Octavian had been driven to drive Antony to commit suicide. It wasn't his fault. And of course, later he burned Antony's replies to his letters so that Antony's side didn't get out.
But Octavian had more pressing business than assuaging his own guilt. Cleopatra was still locked in her flammable tomb with all her flammable treasure, and he really wanted that treasure. The man Octavian sent to talk Cleopatra down from the ledge was the one person Antony had told her she could trust, Proculius. But Cleopatra was less trusting than Antony. She refused to let Proculius in her tomb. She would speak with him only through the bolted door. Proculius tried to reassure her in general terms, but Cleopatra wanted specifics.
Yeah, she's not trusting this dude an inch.
She wanted her children to be allowed to live and to rule Egypt. Proculius kept things vague, swearing over and over that Octavian would take care of her and them, and Cleopatra did not budge an inch. She threatened to burn it all down.
She had the torch lit, it was held up high in her hands, all she had to do was drop it.
Absolutely, and you can't blame her here.
Proculius went away and came back with a friend. The friend took up the negotiation again, speaking to Cleopatra through the door. Meanwhile, Proculius put a ladder up against the building. With 2 servants, he climbed in through the second-floor window. One of Cleopatra's 2 serving maids sounded the alarm, crying, "Wretched Cleopatra, you are taken alive!" Proculius and his men ran down the stairs to catch Cleopatra fumbling with a dagger she'd kept hidden on her hip. She was trying to kill herself. Proculius threw his arms around her, shouting that he would not let her wrong both herself and Octavian. He took her weapon and checked her clothes to make sure she had no poison on her, all the while making reassuring noises. Why rob Octavian of the opportunity to prove his mercy? He was, after all, the most agreeable and humane of commanders.
Oh yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Octavian assigned servants to keep careful watch on Cleopatra night and day and make sure she didn't harm herself. Cleopatra was now on suicide watch. Cleopatra gathered herself. She asked for oils with which to prepare Antony's body for burial, cedar and cinnamon oil and incense. She asked for 2 days to prepare the body. It was a small enough request. Octavian granted it. And after those days passed, Octavian paid Cleopatra a visit.
This would be the first time these two met in person. Honest, guileless Antony was dead, and now Cleopatra and Octavian would finally be in the room together. 2 master manipulators, each with an agenda for this meeting. Octavian had secured Cleopatra's treasure at this point, but he still wanted Cleopatra to come to Rome and walk in his triumph, a major public relations coup for him. He needed Cleopatra to stay alive long enough to do that, and Cleopatra needed Octavian to believe she had no intention of committing suicide, so he'd relax her guard enough so she could.
There are 2 dueling versions of this meeting, one by Plutarch and one by Dio. They could not be more different. Both show Cleopatra and her tactics and strength in a very different light, but they also have some interesting similarities that might help us get at a truth. So, let's look at the one from Dio first. In this one, after Cleopatra prepared Marc Antony's body for burial, she was brought to the palace and allowed to stay in her own rooms with her attendants and all the accustomed luxuries under heavy guard. For this meeting, we see the Cleopatra we know and love from her first meeting with Julius Caesar and Marc Antony. Just as she did with them, she's stage managing the scene to have a desired effect. Here's how Dio tells it, quote, Cleopatra prepared a splendid apartment and a costly couch and arrayed herself with affected negligence. What, this old thing? I just had it lying around. Indeed, her mourning garb wonderfully became her. She seated herself upon the couch. Beside her she placed many images of Julius Caesar of all kinds. So all the busts of Julius Caesar that she just had lying around. Just assembled them in this room. That isn't creepy at all.
Well, it's one of those things where she's like, remember this guy? You're supposed to be like his son, right? I'm his lady, and remember, you owe something to me as a result of that.
And in her bosom, we're talking about what's in Cleopatra's bosom right now.
Oh!
And in her bosom, she put all the letters that Caesar had sent her. When after this, Octavian entered, she leapt gracefully to her feet and cried, Hail, master, for heaven has granted you the mastery and taken it from me. But surely you can see with your own eyes how Julius Caesar looked when he visited me on many occasions, and you have heard people tell how he honored me in various ways and made me queen of the Egyptians. That you may, however, learn something about me from him himself. Take and read the letters which he wrote me with his own hand.
Well played, Cleo.
Yeah.
Octavian wasn't the only person who could read letters to a captive audience in order to spin things in his favor. Cleopatra then proceeded to read Octavian Caesar's love letters to her. Pausing to lament and kiss the letters, she reminded Octavian of her relationship with Caesar, of how he had honored her in life, loved her, and given her a kingdom. I mean, the thing is, Cleo, he didn't honor you in death.
But we're focusing on life here, Jen.
On life, yes, absolutely, on the life thing, yes.
Cleopatra has an agenda, okay?
You could kind of see a flaw here.
I mean, she's super persuasive, though.
She is. Cleopatra bewailed her fate in the silvery musical voice that had been so acclaimed, crying that she wished she'd died before Caesar. Then, turning to Octavian with melting eyes, declared, as if speaking to Julius Caesar, "But in this man here, you are still alive, and while I have him, I have you." This was all intensely awkward for Octavian. He was not expecting this level of intensity. Dio says he sat stiffly beneath these impassioned speeches. He looked at the floor. He continually repeated the lines he'd memorized to tell her, which were that she should be of good cheer and keep a stout heart, for he would see to it that she suffered no harm.
Be of good cheer. Keep a stout heart.
I mean, that doesn't sound like he's going to harm you at all.
It's just platitudes. Like, he came armed with platitudes, and Cleopatra's like, I'm gonna make this really fucking real for you right now.
Mm-hmm.
Cleopatra was disheartened to see that Octavian was not more affected by her efforts. In the next paragraph, Dio has Cleopatra flinging herself at Octavian's feet. She had no desire to live, she wailed, and in between passionate sobs, she begged to be buried next to Antony. Again, Octavian looked awkwardly at the floor, shuffled his feet, and repeated his canned lines about how she should be of good cheer. That's a super awkward Octavian. It's not rising to the occasion here. Cleopatra saw that Octavian would not be moved, and she suspected his purpose, that he wanted her to walk in his triumph. This would, of course, be a humiliation worse than death for her, and she made up her mind. She was resolved to take her own life.
But with Octavian, she pretended to have a change of heart. She told him that she placed her hope in him, and also in the compassion of Livia, his wife. Cleopatra promised to sail with Octavian willingly, and began to ready some jewelry to take with her as gifts for Livia and Octavia, his sister. Octavian was fooled. Confident that Cleopatra wished to live, he relaxed her guard. Not a lot, but just enough.
So that's Dio's account. Here's Plutarch's, and we're starting over again with Octavian coming to visit Cleopatra after she had made Marc Antony's body ready for burial. Quote, "After a few days, Octavian came to talk with Cleopatra and give her comfort. She was lying on a mean pallet bed, clad only in her tunic, but sprang up as he entered and threw herself at his feet. Her hair and face were in terrible disarray, her voice trembled, and her eyes were sunken. There were also visible many marks of the cruel blows upon her bosom. In a word, her body seemed to be no better off than her spirit. Nevertheless, the charm for which she was famous and the boldness of her beauty were not altogether extinguished. They shone forth from within and made themselves manifest in the play of her features. After Octavian had bidden her to lie down and had seated himself near her, she began a sort of justification of her course, ascribing it to necessity and fear of Antony. And that's interesting because we talked about whether or not Antony became violent when she first ran to her mausoleum, and it kind of makes me wonder if that was part of their relationship.
It might have been.
There's nothing on that except for these two clues. We don't know. But as Octavian opposed and refuted her on every point, she quickly changed her tone and sought to move his pity by prayers as one who above all things clung to life.
And finally, she gave him a list which she had of all her treasures. And when one of her stewards showed conclusively that she was stealing away and hiding some of them, she sprang up, seized him by the hair, and showered blows upon his face. And when Octavian, with a smile, stopped her, she said, "But is it not a monstrous thing, O Octavian, that when thou hast deigned to come to me and speak to me, though I am in this wretched plight, my slaves denounce me for reserving some women's adornments? Not for myself, indeed, unhappy woman that I am, but that I may make trifling gifts to Octavia and thy Livia, and through their intercession find thee merciful and more gentle." Octavian was pleased with this speech, being altogether of the opinion that she desired to live. He told her, therefore, that he left these matters for her to manage, and that in all other ways he would give her more splendid treatment than she could possibly expect. Then he went off, supposing that he had deceived her, but rather deceived by her.
So those are the two competing stories. Who knows which version is true, or if either of them are, but there are a few similarities here to note which may point towards some kernels of truth. First, Cleopatra's immense charisma is not diminished by her circumstances. In Dio's account, it renders Octavian uncomfortable and speechless, even though he was the one with all the power and he came to that meeting thinking he'd have the upper hand. In Plutarch's, her appeal shone through even in her horrible state, sick and battered with grief.
Another similarity is that midway through the encounter, she mentions giving some treasures as a gift to Livia and Octavia, Octavian's wife and sister. This flattered and disarmed Octavian in both accounts, exactly what Cleopatra wanted.
And the third similarity was this. In both accounts, Octavian walked away fooled.
Yeah, he did. I think Octavian's emotional intelligence isn't really great.
I don't think so either. I think she just had to give a generally convincing performance.
He's like a lot of people I've met in like different commander roles. They're really good at commanding and they're not great at actually reading people.
I mean, I think that's something that happens when you have a lot of power. Like, you kind of lose some emotional intelligence because you're used to people saying yes to you and adulating you in a certain way.
Yeah, and you think you can read people and remember what it's like to be in their position, and you don't.
Yeah.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney+.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake. And your last name? The Snake.
Dream Team. Get new habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney+, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney Plus and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto-renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
This episode is brought to you by Palmolive. Family time isn't just the big moments. It's weeknight dinners, sitting around the table, everyone talking all at once. So when the plates are empty and the sink is full, use Palmolive Ultra. Palmolive's most powerful formula removes up to 99.9% of grease, leaving your dishes sparkling clean. And the new convenient pump makes cleaning even easier, so you can spend less time tackling dishes and more time together. Shop now at palmolive.com.
Cleopatra never believed Octavian had fallen in love with her, but she still had that power to beguile. A young man from Octavian's entourage developed a bit of a crush on Cleopatra. She asked him to keep her informed of Octavian's plans, and he did. Sometime after that meeting, he passed her a message that Octavian planned to send her and her children back to Rome within 3 days. Time was short.
Cleopatra asked Octavian for permission to pour libations for Antony one last time. He granted her request, and Cleopatra carried the urn that held Antony's ashes to his tomb. There she laid him to rest, saying, quote from Plutarch, "I buried thee, but lately with hands still free. Now, however, I pour libations for thee as a captive, and so carefully guarded that I cannot either with blows or tears disfigure this body of mine, which is a slave's body, and closely watch that it may grace the triumph over thee. Do not expect other honors or libations. These are the last from Cleopatra the captive. For though in life nothing could part us, in death we are likely to change places, you, the Roman, lying buried here, while I, the hapless woman, lie in Italy. Out of all my innumerable ills, not one is so great and dreadful as this short time that I have lived apart from thee." Cleopatra went back to her apartments, drew a bath, and then sat down to a lavish dinner. While she was dining, a man came in from the countryside carrying a basket. The guards asked what was in it, and he opened the lid to show them the big, beautiful figs inside. Everyone remarked on how tasty they looked. The man offered some to the guards. They waved him through. Cleopatra took the basket and gave the man a sealed tablet she'd already prepared for Octavian. She then sent off everyone except her 2 loyal serving women and shut the doors.
Octavian was dining when he received Cleopatra's message. He opened it, read it, and then stood up abruptly, rushing out of the room. The message repeated Cleopatra's request that she be buried with Marc Antony. If he hurried, he might still get there in time to stop her. But when he arrived, he pushed past the surprise guards, who were aware of nothing untoward. It was too late. The scene he came to was one that has been reproduced time and again, almost without change in the literary traditions and artistic traditions as well. Cleopatra lay dead on a golden couch, dressed in her splendid royal regalia, holding the insignia of her office.
One of her serving women lay at her feet, almost dead. The other, barely able to stand, was bending over her mistress's body as Octavian entered, trying to straighten the diadem on Cleopatra's brow. "A fine deed this, Charmian," burst out someone in Octavian's entourage. Charmian shot back, "It is indeed most fine, and befitting the descendant of so many kings." Then she fell next to Cleopatra's couch and died. Interestingly, Cleopatra's two serving women here were named Iris and Charmian. You met them briefly in the Shakespeare scene we read. Charmian was a bit more than a serving woman, though. She was actually Cleopatra's chief head of state. In the most well-known version of this story, it was an asp that killed Cleopatra, hidden in the basket of figs. But even as far back as Plutarch and Dio, people have been doubting the asp story. Plutarch points out that no snake was ever found in Cleopatra's room or on her clothes, although, quote, people said they saw traces of it by the sea. I don't know what traces of a snake that you see. By the sea? What is that, like snake poop? Snake skin? Snake tracks? I literally don't know what that means.
It's gotta be skin.
I guess. I also think it's super important to note here that by asp, the ancients usually meant to refer to the 6-foot Egyptian cobra, which is not the kind of snake you can easily hide in a basket or miss in searching a room. On the other hand, even a baby one has enough poison to kill somebody, so I guess it could be a baby asp.
Possible.
There are also some questions about the way you die when you're bitten by an Egyptian cobra and the effect that it has in your body, and whether or not Cleopatra's body looked like it had been bitten by an Egyptian cobra. And we go into that in more detail in Locusta the Poisoner. So if you want the technical, medical details about that, look there.
Exactly. We're not going to rehash it here. Both Plutarch and Dio suggest other methods of poison delivery, such as a comb or pin. The only marks on Cleopatra's body were 2 puncture wounds on her arm, barely more than scratches. If poison did go in through those wounds, it had barely broken the skin. When he saw that Cleopatra had outwitted him one last time, Octavian was enraged. He immediately brought in some of the people of the Scilli, a local tribe said to be immune to snakebite, and also to have the ability to suck snake poison out of a wound and discern which snake it came from. This time their skills failed, and the Scilli could find no answers. The mystery remains. Octavian had ordered that Cleopatra be buried with Antony, in a fashion that befitted her rank. Iris and Charmian were also given regal burials.
So what happened after? Julius Caesar might have been hated by the Alexandrian populace, but he'd been intensely curious about their culture and history. Marc Antony had been adored by the Alexandrians and loved mingling with them as a commoner. Octavian, by contrast, wasn't interested in Egyptian customs and history, and he wasn't interested in the Egyptians, and he made sure everybody knew it.
I'm sorry, how could you not be fascinated?
No, he was such a fucking dick. Tell us how much of a dick he was, Jen.
Shall I?
You shall, please.
Octavian strutted around the city, dripping scorn. The Alexandrians offered to show him the tombs of the previous pharaohs. Perhaps they meant an unforgettable expedition to the Valley of the Kings, or a foray to the pyramids. I mean, yes! Who doesn't want to see that?
I know!
Even in this time period, those would be just marvels.
It's on my bucket list, for sure.
Octavian scoffed at the opportunity because dick.
Because he literally couldn't be more of an asshole here.
He said he hadn't come there to see a bunch of moldy corpses. Dick!
Asshole.
Sorry, it's unfair to dicks to call him a dick. It's unfair to assholes to call him an asshole.
I hope my asshole is a better asshole than Octavian in general as a human. All it does is spew shit, but at least it's into the toilet. Oh my god, I'm with the scatological humor. It's time that I elevate my game.
Ms. Williamson, please elevate your game.
Caesar, you're complicit in this. You picked this guy.
He's not going to say anything to that.
Crickets. Asshole. When he was offered the chance to see the Apis bull, an important sacred animal to the Egyptians, Octavian turned that down too, saying he worshipped gods, not cattle. Ugh.
He's just going out of his way to fucking demoralize their culture and be worst. He's just a colonizing asshole. Not that all Romans weren't, but
He paid a visit to the tomb of Alexander the Great, the biggest colonizing asshole of them all, I guess, just as Julius Caesar and Marc Antony once did, and carelessly broke off Alexander's nose.
I don't think he fucking did it carelessly. I think he was like, I'm taking that with me. I'm Octavian. Goddamn great.
He's like, I can break this if I want. What are you going to do about it?
Tony, we're getting to the end of the episode, and this is really sad, and I'm really sad I have to read this bit.
I would hug you if we weren't an ocean away right now.
A whole ocean. Okay, anyway, Cleopatra's death was the end of Egypt as an independent kingdom in the ancient world. Henceforth, it was a Roman province and a very special one. Because it was Rome's richest province and the source of all the grain, it was considered too dangerous to fall into anyone else's hands, and it was considered a crown domain, a private property of the emperor himself. Other senators needed special permission to go there. I'm going to take a quick detour because when we recorded the Ancient World Stark Family, the first episode, Germanicus the Manicus,
our blue-eyed prince, our golden god.
So one of the things that I got really bent around the axle was you couldn't enter into Egypt without the emperor's permission. And this was a thing that set off like another feud between Germanicus and Tiberius, because Germanicus did go into Egypt to do something, I think, with grain. And I was like, I didn't understand where that came from. And actually, it was a law Augustus had passed, and it comes from right here.
Yeah, and Augustus is Octavian. He changed his name yet again to Augustus.
We're almost at the end, and I've had way too much wine now. But the thing that really gets to me also is Germanicus went there because he wanted to see where his grandfather was defeated in battle.
And his grandfather was who, Jen?
His grandfather was Marc Antony.
Yeah.
Because this is the Julian-Claudian dynasty.
So, after Cleopatra's death, Octavian went on a money grab. He scooped up all of Cleopatra's treasury. It was said a river of gold and precious gems flowed through Rome at his triumph. He sent men throughout Alexandria, exacting heavy fines and taxes on the populace. When a proper pseudo-legal pretext couldn't be found, they simply took. The going rate was 2/3 of everything everyone owned. It all went into Octavian's coffers. Most of Marc Antony's surviving close friends were sentenced to death. So anyone who was a member of the Partners in Death, Octavian did his best to erase Marc Antony from history. He removed all statues of Marc Antony in Egypt and passed an ordinance that no one could transact business on Marc Antony's birthday, January 14th. It was declared an unlucky day. The Senate passed a decree that no one could ever give the names Marc and Antony together in the same name. I mean, it's a good thing Marc Antony went around naming things and people after himself, because now there's a rule against that.
Cleopatra's statues, though, were allowed to stay in Alexandria. There were several reasons. First, Cleopatra was strongly associated with Isis, and going around removing statues of a popular goddess seemed like a great way to incite a riot. Also, a friend of Cleopatra's bribed Octavian over 2,000 talents to let the statues stay. We don't know if it was talents of gold or silver or what.
Big difference.
Apparently it was a small fortune.
Or a big fortune.
Or a big fortune, we don't know. About 17 years after the death of Cleopatra and Antony, Octavian, now the Emperor Augustus, completed construction on the Caesareum, the immense temple dedicated to Julius Caesar. He rededicated it to his own imperial cult. The Caesareum had a storied history. Approximately 400 years after it was completed, it was made the headquarters of Cyril of Alexandria, a leading figure in early Christianity. The mathematician and philosopher Hypatia was murdered in this building by an angry mob in 415 AD. Parts of the building continue to stand until the 19th century, which is really impressive.
During construction, Cleopatra had the obelisks we now know as Cleopatra's Needles, 3 massive obelisks that were more than 1,200 years old in Cleopatra's time, brought from the cities of Luxor and Heliopolis to adorn the temple, but they were never installed, and they lay in the sand at the temple's feet until they were dug up in the 1800s and sent as diplomatic gifts for various reasons to Paris, London, and New York. You can still see them in those cities today.
It's said that the remaining massive pearl earring, twin of the one Cleopatra had dissolved in the most expensive dinner party ever, was broken in half, and each half installed in the ears of the statue of Venus, set in the Pantheon in Rome.
So the Pantheon was built in 113 AD over an older temple that was commissioned by Agrippa during the reign of Augustus, who was also Octavian. And I tried to track down whether this statue of Venus that they're talking about was in fact the statue commissioned by Julius Caesar back in 46 BC, and whether the Pantheon or its predecessor was where the statue had wound up. I couldn't find anything definite. I did find, though, that Octavian allowed the statue of Cleopatra that Caesar had set up in the Forum to stand.
How magnanimous, Octavian.
Isn't that nice?
So what happened to the children of Antony and Cleopatra? Just before the final battle, Antony threw a coming-of-age party for his oldest son and Cleopatra's, Antyllus and Caesarion. These boys fared the worst. Antyllus was probably dead before Cleopatra was. With Antony barely cold and still lying in Cleopatra's tomb, Antyllus was betrayed by his tutor for the sake of a jewel the boy wore on his neck. Antyllus fled to the Caesareum to take refuge, but he was dragged out by Octavian soldiers pleading for his life. They beheaded him on the temple steps, ignoring his pleas. The tutor took the jewel. He was later crucified for the crime.
Cleopatra had sent Caesarion out of town weeks ago when she started to realize her cause was lost. She'd sent him on a ship to India with his tutor and a small fortune in wealth so he could start over. Caesarion ought to be safe. But Caesarion was also betrayed by his tutor, who persuaded him to return to Egypt because Octavian had promised to set him up to rule. But Octavian had made no such promise. Caesarion was executed, possibly by strangulation. That left 3 remaining children, the twins, Cleopatra Selene and Alexander Helios, and their little brother, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Octavian took them to Rome and made them walk in his triumph. It said the golden chains they had to wear were too heavy to walk in, and they drew a lot of Roman sympathy.
It would have looked terrible for Octavian to have them executed. Instead, he gave them to his sister Octavia to raise, because, of course, what else does Octavia have to do? Along with Antony's other children, Julius Antonius, his other son with Fulvia, his 2 daughters with Octavia, both called Antonia, and Octavia's 3 other children with her first husband, Marcellus.
Let's look at the count of children living in Octavia's house now. Antony's younger son with Fulvia, who survived, Julius Antonius, that's 1. His 2 daughters with Octavia, Antonia and Antonia, that's 2. That's 3 total. Octavia's 3 other children with her first husband, Marcellus, that's 6. And then Cleopatra and Antony's children, Cleopatra Selene, Alexander Helios, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. That is 9 children in total living with Octavia. Although I will say that some of the older kids, I'm not sure exactly when they married because they married them off young, So some of them might be married and living in their spouses' households at this point, but 9 children in total.
That is a big, full house. The thing I love about Octavia and her 2 daughters, both the Antonias, they later become the badass grandma, Antonia the Younger, I believe, who we talk about again in our Ancient World Stark family. And they learn this in the house of Octavia. Because Octavia was around a while, didn't get exiled. She dealt with Augustus in the face that you kind of just want to punch, but no, you shouldn't, but do. So, they had to have some skills.
Yeah.
So it's said Octavia raised Antony's children as attentively as if they were her own. Sounds like she's a decent human being and wouldn't take out the sins of their parents on children.
That's pretty nice of her, considering that she's had all of this crap dumped in her lap.
Absolutely. The daughter, Cleopatra Selene, was given in marriage sometime around the age of 15 to King Juba II of Numidia, who was about 22. I mean, this is not the worst age difference we will see on this podcast.
Because usually it's 13-year-olds marrying 50-year-olds. It's fucking horrible.
God. Cleopatra Selene's 2 brothers, Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Philadelphus, had their lives spared by Octavian as a wedding present, and we hear nothing more of them after that.
I mean, that is a pretty ominous wedding present, number 1. Number 2, the fact that nothing is heard about them after that has been interpreted by modern scholars as they both died somehow. We don't know how. It's a mystery, but they're probably both dead not long after that. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
Juba II's father, King Juba I, had fought against Julius Caesar. You remember him. He was the one with the untrained elephants. We talk about him in one of our Caesar episodes. And also in a war elephant episode.
War elephant fail.
Yeah. Big war elephant fail. Juba II had also been made to walk in a Roman triumph as a child as a result of that elephant fail. He and Cleopatra Selene had a lot in common, and they seem to have had a happy marriage. The couple was sent to rule Mauritania, a new Roman territory. They named their capital Caesarea. It's now Churchill in Algeria. Cleopatra Selene played a strong role in the politics of the region, establishing policies that helped the new province grow wealthy and successful. She transformed her city into a place of art and learning, building a beautiful library there. She maintained a strong connection to her mother's people. It's said she had a thing for collecting Ptolemaic busts.
I mean, I guess, collecting a Ptolemaic bust is definitely better than gifting people body parts, which was also a Ptolemaic thing.
Yeah, I hope she didn't gift people body parts. I can't say that she didn't.
That was her language of love. Cleopatra Selene ruled with her husband for many years and had 2 children, a boy and a girl. She may have lived to the age of 65. centuries later, Queen Zenobia of Palmyra would claim to be descended from her. Although that may have been propaganda, but I'm going with it.
We're not sure.
And we talk about Queen Zenobia in Amazons, Warrior Queens and Generals, and I love that episode.
Octavian, who later became Augustus and transformed Rome from republic into empire, may have tried to erase Marc Antony for good. But in the story that's come down to us through time, Octavian comes off as the villain. It's Marc Antony and Cleopatra we sympathize with, two people who loved, fought, and died together, and who really tried. Try though he might, Octavian couldn't control that story. It shattered his masterful propaganda machine, inspiring the world's greatest writers, actors and actresses, artists and musicians for more than 2,000 years. We hope that somewhere, feasting among the gods where they belong, Marc Antony and Cleopatra are having the last laugh.
So that's it for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, catch up with us on social at Ancient Histfan on Twitter and Ancient History Fangirl on Instagram and Facebook.
If you want to listen to more new episodes in the meantime, check out our Patreon. We're running exclusive bonus content for Patreon subscribers where we go down rabbit holes we didn't get to address in our regular episodes.
Right now, we've got some episodes about pirates. Julius Caesar has come back from the dead to school the creators of Game of Thrones on how to run a battle against zombies.
And we have an episode up about Lepidus. Lepidus is, what is it called, Jen?
It's called Lepidus' very own episode.
The Lepisode.
And we tell the story of King Herod and Cleopatra and why these two hated each other.
It's our first mini arc. It's 2 parts. Herod and Cleopatra wouldn't touch you with a barge pole.
Because, guys, we can't even stick to writing a mini-sode. They have to be longer than is normal for anyone.
It's our fault. We blame ourselves. Actually, I blame me because I'm the one who wrote all the mini-sodes so far.
Patreon membership starts at just $2 a month. And you can find the link on our homepage at ancienthistoryfangirl.com or at patreon.com/ancienthistoryfangirl. And we have some Patreon members to thank, by the way.
Krista Taubert, thank you so much. If you're not ready to subscribe for something monthly, we totally get it. We also have a Ko-Fi account where you can kick us a few bucks just to show your support on a one-time basis. This podcast isn't free to produce or keep going, and every little bit of support helps.
Or you can just leave us a nice review. They really help keep us going. They're great morale boosts. They help in the algorithms, and they help us get seen by other people. If you're not the sort of person who likes to write on the internet, I feel you. Tell a friend. Tell two. Word of mouth is also really powerful magic.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Monster Energy. Everybody knows White Monster Zero Ultra. That's the OG. It kicked off this whole zero sugar energy drink thing. But Ultra is a whole lineup now. You've got Strawberry Dreams, Blue Hawaiian, Sunrise, and Vice Guava. And they all bring the Monster Energy punch. So if you've been living in the white can, branch out. Ultra's got a flavor for every vibe. And every single one is zero sugar. Tap the banner to learn more.